A 9-year-old boy arrives at the emergency room with horrific wounds covering his arms after saving his 5-year-old sister from a vicious dog. When the doctor asks how it happened, the boy's whispered answer about who set the dog on them makes him immediately call 911. The walk home from Maple Creek Elementary was always the same. Exactly 12 minutes if they didn't stop, 15 if Emma got distracted by the Pattersons' cat, and anywhere up to 20 if they took the longer route that avoided the Morgans' house. Today, Noah chose the longer path without hesitation. It had been that kind of day. "Noah, you're walking too fast again," Emma complained, her small hand tugging at his. At 5 years old, she had to take nearly 2 steps for each of his, her pink backpack bouncing against her shoulders as she hurried to keep up. Noah slowed his pace, adjusting the weight of his own backpack. "Sorry, Em. Just thinking about stuff." That was the understatement of the year. His mind had been racing since lunch period when Jason Miller had asked why Noah's dad never showed up for parents' night anymore. The question had settled in his stomach like a rock, and 3 hours later, it still hadn't dissolved. "Did you get in trouble again? Your thinking face looks like your trouble face," Emma observed, studying him with eyes that somehow always saw too much. Her light brown hair was falling out of the ponytail their mother had carefully arranged that morning. "I'm not in trouble," Noah said, managing a smile. "And you need a hair fix." He stopped on the sidewalk and knelt down, tucking the loose strands behind her ears. His own dark hair fell across his forehead as he worked, and he absently pushed it back. "Mom's going to think we were running through a tornado," Emma giggled. "Can we have mac and cheese tonight? It's Friday, so probably pizza. Dennis likes pizza. Remember?" The change in Emma's expression was subtle, just a slight tightening around her eyes, a small downward turn of her mouth. Noah noticed because he'd been watching for it ever since Dennis had started coming around more often. 6 months in, and his mother's boyfriend was now a regular fixture at their dinner table 3 nights a week. "I like pizza too," Emma said automatically, but without enthusiasm. Noah stood up and they continued walking, passing Mrs. Abernathy's house with its perfectly trimmed hedges and the Wilkinsons with their always running sprinklers. Maple Creek was the definition of suburban normal, tidy homes, minivans in driveways, mothers chatting at school pickup. From the outside, no one would guess that the Wilson house had its own silent earthquakes happening inside. When they reached the corner of Elmwood Avenue, Noah hesitated. Right would lead them past the Morgans' house with its menacing chain-link fence and even more menacing dog. Left would add 5 minutes to their walk but would bypass the daily anxiety of hearing Brutus's deep, aggressive barking. "Left?" Emma asked hopefully, already pulling him in that direction. She feared the dog even more than he did. "Left," Noah agreed, letting her lead the way. They turned down Oak Ridge Lane, passing houses with Halloween decorations already appearing despite it being only the first week of October. Plastic skeletons grinned from porches, and fake cobwebs stretched across bushes. Last year, their dad had helped them carve pumpkins, 3 of them lined up on the front steps like a strange little family. Noah wondered if they'd carve pumpkins this year at all. "Noah!" Emma's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Look, Mrs. Jenkins is waving at us." Across the street, their elderly neighbor stood in her garden, pruning shears in one hand as she beckoned them over with the other. Mrs. Jenkins had lived in her small blue house for as long as anyone could remember. She'd been their occasional babysitter since Emma was born, and since their dad had left, she'd become an even more regular presence in their lives. They crossed the empty street and approached her white picket fence. "Well, hello there, Wilson children," Mrs. Jenkins said, her voice warm and scratchy from years of smoking cigarettes, though she'd quit long before Noah was born. "How was school today?" "I got a gold star for my counting," Emma announced proudly. "And I bet you deserved it." Mrs. Jenkins turned her attention to Noah. "And you, young man? Any gold stars?" Noah shrugged. "We don't really do gold stars in 4th grade." "No, I suppose not. Too grown up for all that now." Her eyes crinkled at the corners. "Is your mother working late again tonight?" "She's on till 7, Noah answered. It was Friday, which meant Rebecca would dash home from her nursing shift at Maple Creek Memorial, spend 30 minutes getting ready, and then Dennis would arrive at 8 for their usual Friday night routine pizza for the kids, a movie they'd half-watch, and then Dennis and their mom talking quietly in the kitchen over wine until Noah herded Emma up to bed. Mrs. Jenkins nodded thoughtfully. "Well, I made snickerdoodles this morning. Too many for just me. Would you two like to come in for cookies and milk before heading home?" Emma was already bouncing on her toes, but Noah hesitated. "We should get home and do homework first." The truth was, he needed time to prepare the house. Pick up the toys Emma had left scattered in the living room. Make sure the dishes from breakfast weren't still in the sink. Their mom was trying so hard, working extra shifts and keeping everything together. The least he could do was make sure Dennis didn't have anything to comment on when he arrived. "Your homework will still be there in half an hour," Mrs. Jenkins said with a knowing look that made Noah wonder if she somehow understood the calculations running through his head. "And I could use the company." 20 minutes later, they sat at Mrs. Jenkins' kitchen table, the scent of cinnamon and sugar hanging in the air. Emma had milk on her upper lip and cookie crumbs on her chin as she chattered about her kindergarten adventures. Noah ate more slowly, savoring the warmth and simple comfort of the moment. "Your mother mentioned she's working a double tomorrow," Mrs. Jenkins said casually, refilling Noah's milk glass. Noah nodded, a small twist of anxiety returning to his stomach. "Yeah, she's covering for someone. Dennis is going to watch us." "For the whole day?" "The whole weekend, actually. She's on Saturday and Sunday." It would be the first time Dennis had watched them for more than a few hours. The thought made the cookie in Noah's mouth suddenly taste like cardboard. "I see." Mrs. Jenkins was quiet for a moment. "Well, if you or Emma want to come over and help me in the garden, you're more than welcome. I could use some strong young arms to help plant those bulbs for spring." Noah recognized the offer for what it was, an escape hatch if needed. "Thanks, Mrs. Jenkins. Maybe we will." By the time they left Mrs. Jenkins' house, it was nearly 4 o'clock. They took the long way back, their pace unhurried now that they had snickerdoodles in their bellies and the weight of cookies wrapped in napkins in their pockets. For later, Mrs. Jenkins had insisted, tucking them into Noah's hand with a gentle squeeze. When they reached their modest 2-story house with its slightly peeling white paint and crooked mailbox, Noah felt the familiar mixture of relief and tension that coming home now inspired. He dug the house key out from the front pocket of his backpack and let them in. "Shoes off," he reminded Emma automatically, though she was already kicking off her sneakers in the small entryway. The house was quiet and still held the slight morning chill. Noah went through his mental checklist: turn up the thermostat, check the living room for clutter, make sure Emma started her homework. While Emma settled at the kitchen table with her simple kindergarten worksheets, Noah moved through the house with practiced efficiency. He picked up 3 of Emma's stuffed animals from the couch, returned a half-empty cereal bowl to the kitchen, and straightened the throw pillows that their mother took pride in. Small things, but they mattered. Dennis always seemed to notice the little imperfections, the small signs that Rebecca was, in his words, struggling to keep up. Noah had overheard him telling her once that she should consider a cleaning service, just until you get things under control, as if their home was a disaster instead of merely lived in. By the time he heard their mother's car in the driveway at 7:15, Noah had finished his math homework, helped Emma with hers, and was sitting on the living room floor with his sketchbook while Emma watched a cartoon on low volume. "I'm home," Rebecca called as she entered, the exhaustion in her voice poorly masked by forced cheer. She appeared in the living room doorway, still in her blue scrubs with her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun. At 34, Rebecca Wilson's face showed the strain of the past 2 years, faint lines around her eyes that deepened when she was tired, which was most of the time now. Emma jumped up and ran to her, wrapping her arms around their mother's waist. "We had cookies at Mrs. Jenkins' house." Rebecca smiled, running a hand over Emma's hair. "Did you now? And did you save room for dinner?" "Pizza night," Emma declared happily. "That's right, sweetie. Dennis is bringing it when he comes over." Rebecca's eyes found Noah, who hadn't moved from his spot on the floor. How was school, bud? Noah shrugged. Fine. I got an A on my spelling test. That's my smart boy. She crossed to him and bent down to kiss the top of his head, and he caught the familiar scent of hospital antiseptic mixed with her vanilla lotion. What are you drawing? Noah closed his sketchbook before she could see. The drawing wasn't finished yet. Just rough outlines of a boy standing between a small girl and a shadowy shape that might have been a monster or might have been something else. He wasn't sure himself. Just stuff, he answered. Emma already did her homework. I checked it. Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. Thanks, Noah. You're such a good helper. She straightened up, wincing slightly as she stretched her back. I need a quick shower before Dennis gets here. Can you keep an eye on your sister for 15 more minutes? Sure, Mom. As Rebecca headed upstairs, Emma returned to her spot in front of the TV. Noah opened his sketchbook again, adding more detail to the shadowy figure. It was taking shape now, not quite human, not quite animal. Is Dennis staying all weekend? Emma asked suddenly, her eyes still on the cartoon but her mind clearly elsewhere. Yeah. Mom has to work. Emma was quiet for a moment. Will he make his angry face if I spill anything? The innocent question made Noah's chest tighten. Dennis never yelled at them. He was too smart for that. Instead, he had a way of looking disappointed, of sighing heavily and cleaning up whatever mess they'd made while making comments like, Your mom works so hard. She doesn't need to come home to this. Just be careful, Em, Noah said softly. And if you're worried about spilling, I can pour your drinks. Okay? She nodded, seemingly satisfied with this solution. Upstairs, they heard the shower running. Noah returned to his drawing, adding definition to the boy's stance, feet planted firmly, arms outstretched protectively. He'd learned in art class that posture could tell a story all by itself. By 8:05, Dennis's black Audi pulled into their driveway. Noah watched through the window as their mother's boyfriend climbed out, pizza boxes balanced in one hand, his cell phone in the other. Dennis Barrow was handsome in a conventional way, tall with dark blonde hair cut expensively short, always dressed in button-downs and tailored pants even on casual Friday nights. He finished his call before heading to the front door, his face transforming from serious businessman to charming boyfriend as he approached. Rebecca, freshly showered and changed into jeans and a pretty blue sweater, opened the door before he could knock. Hey you, she said, leaning in for a kiss. Hey yourself, Dennis replied, his voice warm as he handed her the pizza boxes. Sorry I'm a bit late. Client call ran long. No problem. Kids are ready for pizza. Rebecca led him into the living room where Noah had already turned off the TV and was helping Emma wash her hands at the kitchen sink. There they are, Dennis said with a broad smile that showed his perfect teeth. How are my two favorite kids doing tonight? Emma dried her hands on a towel and waved shyly. Noah merely nodded, observing the familiar performance. Dennis was always at his best when Rebecca was watching, full of smiles and jokes, asking them questions about school and actually waiting for their answers. It was only when their mother stepped away that his attention would drift, his responses becoming shorter, his impatience showing through in subtle ways. As they settled around the kitchen table, Dennis placed his hand on Rebecca's lower back, guiding her to her seat with a gentleness that made her smile appreciatively. Noah watched the gesture, remembering how his father used to do the same thing, though with less deliberation, more natural ease. So, big weekend coming up, Dennis said as he handed out pizza slices. Your mom tells me we're going to have some quality time together while she saves lives at the hospital. I'm hardly saving lives in the pediatric ward, Rebecca said with a small laugh. Mostly I'm taking temperatures and giving out stickers to brave kids. You're still my hero, Dennis said, squeezing her hand. His eyes moved to Noah. So what should we do this weekend, buddy? Any big plans? Noah took a bite of pizza to avoid answering immediately. The truth was, he'd been dreading this weekend since his mother had mentioned the double shifts 3 days ago. He'd never spent that much time alone with Dennis and wasn't sure what to expect. Maybe we could go to the park, Emma suggested hopefully. The one with the big slide. Dennis nodded. Could do. Weather's supposed to be nice. He took a sip of the beer he'd brought with him. Or we could check out that new movie. The animated one about the talking animals or whatever. Wilderness Patrol, Emma supplied, her face lighting up. With the Bear Rangers. That's the one. Rebecca smiled gratefully at Dennis. That sounds like fun. You guys could make a day of it. Movie, then lunch out. Noah pushed his pizza crust around his plate. He'd been saving his allowance for that movie, planning to take Emma himself next weekend. Somehow, the idea of seeing it with Dennis made it less appealing. We'll figure something out, Dennis said easily. Right, Noah? Noah nodded, aware of his mother's expectant gaze. Yeah, sure. The rest of dinner passed with Rebecca telling stories from her shift. A little boy who'd come in with a Lego stuck in his nose. An elderly patient who kept escaping from his room to flirt with the nurses. Dennis laughed in all the right places, asked all the right questions, and kept Rebecca's wine glass filled. By the time they moved to the living room for the movie, some comedy that Noah wasn't interested in, Rebecca was relaxed and smiling more than Noah had seen all week. Noah positioned himself on the floor with his back against the couch, Emma beside him with her favorite blanket. On the couch above them, Dennis had his arm around their mother, his fingers absently stroking her shoulder. The casual intimacy made Noah look away. Halfway through the movie, Emma fell asleep, her head drooping against Noah's arm. He carefully adjusted her so she wouldn't wake up with a stiff neck, then returned his attention to his sketchbook, only half watching the TV. She's out cold, Dennis observed, his voice low. Long day for the little one? She gets tired early on Fridays, Rebecca said fondly. Noah, do you want to take her up to bed? Noah nodded, grateful for the excuse to leave the room. He gently scooped Emma up, her body limp with sleep, and carried her upstairs to the room they still shared. Their house had 3 bedrooms, but the smallest one had been converted to a home office before their father left. Now it sat mostly unused, a sad reminder of plans that had fallen apart. He tucked Emma into her bed with its pink unicorn sheets, making sure her favorite stuffed rabbit was within reach. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. In sleep, her face looked even younger, her eyelashes casting tiny shadows on her cheeks. Night, Em, he whispered, smoothing her hair once before turning on the small nightlight that cast star shapes on the ceiling. Instead of returning downstairs, Noah changed into his pajamas and climbed into his own bed on the other side of the room. He could hear the murmur of voices from below, his mother's occasional laugh, the lower rumble of Dennis's responses. He picked up his sketchbook again, adding more details to his drawing by the glow of the nightlight. The boy in the picture was clearer now, his stance protective, his face determined despite the fear etched into his features. The monster shadow loomed larger than before, its shape still ambiguous but somehow more threatening. The small girl behind the boy was barely sketched in, just an outline with a frightened face, trusting the boy to keep her safe. Noah wasn't sure why he kept drawing versions of this same scene. Something about it felt important, like he was trying to work out a problem that he couldn't quite identify. From downstairs, he heard his mother laugh again, then the sound of glasses clinking. Dennis would stay late tonight, as he always did on Fridays. Sometimes Noah would wake in the early morning hours to hear him leaving, the front door closing quietly, the sound of his car starting in the pre-dawn darkness. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, Dennis would still be here when Noah woke up. The thought made his stomach tighten again. He put his sketchbook aside and lay down, pulling his blue comforter up to his chin. Outside, the autumn wind rustled through the maple tree that gave their neighborhood its name, sending shadows dancing across the ceiling of their room. Noah watched them, his mind racing with thoughts of the coming weekend. Next door, through the wall that separated their properties, the Morgan's dog began to bark, a deep, aggressive sound that always made Noah think of bared teeth and straining chains. Usually, Mr. Morgan would shout for Brutus to be quiet, but tonight the barking continued, unanswered. Noah rolled onto his side, facing Emma's sleeping form, and made a silent promise to himself and to her. No matter what, he would make sure this weekend went smoothly. He would keep Emma happy, the house tidy, and give Dennis no reason to show that other side of himself, the cold, impatient man who emerged when Rebecca wasn't looking. As he finally drifted towards sleep, the barking next door faded into the background. But the image from his drawing remained vivid in his mind. The boy with his arms outstretched, standing between the small girl and the approaching shadow. In his sleep, Noah's fingers twitched, as if reaching for a pencil to finish the picture or perhaps reaching out to hold something at bay. Noah woke to the unfamiliar sound of cartoons playing downstairs. For a moment he was disoriented, his mind still fuzzy with sleep. Saturday mornings usually meant his mother making coffee in the kitchen, the gentle hum of the washing machine in the background, not the blaring of animated voices and exaggerated sound effects. Then he remembered. Mom was working doubles all weekend. Dennis was here. He rolled over to check on Emma, but her bed was empty, the unicorn sheets thrown back in her usual hasty manner. The digital clock on his nightstand read 7:42 a.m., early for a Saturday, especially after a late Friday night. Noah pushed himself out of bed, quickly changing from his pajamas into jeans and a blue t-shirt. He ran a hand through his dark hair, not bothering with more than that. Dennis wasn't the type to care if they looked presentable for breakfast. As he headed downstairs, the volume of the TV seemed to grow with each step. He found Emma sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, still in her pajamas, eyes fixed on the screen where cartoon characters chased each other with impossible speed. "Morning, Em," Noah said, raising his voice to be heard over the television. "Did you eat breakfast yet?" She shook her head without looking away from the screen. "Dennis said we could have cereal whenever we want." "Where is he?" Noah asked, scanning the empty living room. Emma pointed vaguely toward the kitchen. "On his phone. He said not to bother him." Noah nodded, absorbing this information with the resigned acceptance that came from his expectations being met. He headed to the kitchen, where he found Dennis sitting at the table, coffee mug in one hand, cell phone in the other. He was still in what appeared to be last night's clothes, his face showing the slight stubble of a man who hadn't yet bothered to shave. "Morning," Noah said quietly, not wanting to interrupt whatever important business had Dennis frowning at his phone screen. Dennis looked up, seeming almost surprised to find Noah standing there. "Hey, buddy. Sleep okay?" "Yeah." Noah moved toward the cabinet where they kept the cereal. "Emma hasn't had breakfast yet. I was going to make some for both of us." "Help yourself," Dennis said, already returning his attention to his phone. "Your mom left some money on the counter for pizza or whatever later." Noah found the small stack of bills tucked under a refrigerator magnet, his mother's careful planning for her absence. Next to it was a note in her handwriting. "Call if you need anything. Love you both. Heart suit." She'd drawn a small heart next to her name. Noah touched the paper briefly before turning away. He prepared bowls of cereal for himself and Emma, adding a sliced banana to his sisters, a small attempt to include something healthy in the sugary breakfast that their mother usually balanced with whole grain toast or yogurt. When he carried the bowls to the living room, Emma took hers without looking away from the television. "Thanks, Noah," she said, automatically spooning cereal into her mouth. Noah sat beside her on the floor, his own breakfast balanced on his knees. "Maybe turn it down a little bit?" he suggested, nodding toward the TV. "It's pretty loud." Emma obediently reached for the remote and lowered the volume slightly. "Dennis said I could watch whatever I want," she informed him, as if expecting Noah to object. "That's fine," Noah assured her. "Just not so loud that it gives us headaches. Okay?" They ate in silence for a few minutes, the cartoon providing the only soundtrack to their morning. From the kitchen came the occasional sound of Dennis speaking into his phone, his voice a low, indistinct rumble that rose and fell with what seemed like business-related frustration. "Is Mom going to be gone all day?" Emma asked suddenly, scraping the last of the milk from her bowl. "All weekend," Noah corrected gently. "Remember? She has to work 2 whole days at the hospital." Emma's face fell slightly. "Oh, right." She glanced toward the kitchen, then leaned closer to Noah. "Can we go to Mrs. Jenkins' house again? She said we could help her in the garden." The hopeful note in her voice made Noah's chest tighten. Maybe later, he said. We should see what Dennis wants to do first. He mentioned maybe taking us to that movie you want to see. Wilderness Patrol? Yeah, that one. Emma's expression brightened. With popcorn? Probably. Noah collected her empty bowl and stacked it with his own. Why don't you go get dressed while I clean up? Then we can ask him about the movie. As Emma headed upstairs, Noah carried their bowls to the kitchen. Dennis was still at the table, now scrolling through something on his phone, his coffee apparently forgotten. Emma and I were wondering. Noah began carefully, setting the dishes in the sink. If we might go see that movie today? The one you mentioned last night. Dennis looked up, seeming to need a moment to process the question. Movie? Oh right. Yeah, we could do that. He checked his watch. There's probably an afternoon showing or something. I can look it up, Noah offered. I think the closest theater is the one at the mall. Dennis nodded absently. You do that. Let me know what time. He returned to his phone, effectively ending the conversation. Noah washed their breakfast dishes quickly, then headed upstairs to help Emma pick out clothes for the day. He found her struggling to pull a sweater over her head, her arms tangled in the sleeves. Hold on, he laughed, coming to her rescue. You've got it all twisted. It's too small, Emma complained as he helped straighten the garment. No, you're just growing too fast, Noah teased, smoothing her hair where static electricity had made it stand on end. Mom says we need to go shopping for new fall clothes soon. Once Emma was properly dressed in the slightly too small sweater and a pair of jeans, Noah helped her brush her teeth and comb her hair. These were all things she could technically do herself, but their morning routine had evolved this way over time, Noah gently guiding his sister through the steps that their mother would normally oversee. Can I wear my butterfly clip? Emma asked, pointing to the small hair accessory on the bathroom counter. Sure, Noah said, carefully securing a section of her hair with the pink and purple clip. There, pretty as a picture. Pleased with her appearance, Emma skipped back downstairs while Noah took a few minutes to make their beds and straighten up their room. It was a habit he'd developed in the months since their father left this attention to order, to making sure everything was in its place. It gave him a sense of control in a world that increasingly felt beyond his grasp. By the time he rejoined Emma in the living room, she had returned to her spot in front of the TV, though the volume was kept at a reasonable level. Dennis had disappeared. Where's Dennis? Noah asked, glancing around. Upstairs, Emma said without looking away from the screen. He said he needed a shower. Noah nodded, relieved to have a moment alone with his sister. He sat on the couch behind her and pulled his phone from his pocket to check movie times. The local theater had showings of Wilderness Patrol at 1:15, 3:40, and 6:25. The earliest would probably be best less crowded, and it would leave time for other activities afterward. While he scrolled through the theater website, Noah's mind drifted back to the first time Dennis had entered their lives. It had been at a community fundraiser for the hospital where their mother worked. Some fancy dinner that Rebecca had dressed up for, leaving Noah and Emma with Mrs. Jenkins for the evening. She'd come home with flushed cheeks and bright eyes, mentioning casually that she'd met someone interesting. A week later, Dennis had appeared at their door with flowers and that perfect smile, asking Rebecca out for coffee. Noah remembered how his mother had transformed in those early weeks, the way she'd started wearing makeup again, how she'd laugh more easily, the spring returning to her step after months of exhausted plodding through her days. He couldn't blame her for wanting that, for needing someone who made her feel like more than just an overworked single mother of two. The first few times Dennis had come over for dinner, he'd brought small gifts for Noah and Emma, a sketch pad and quality pencils for Noah after noticing his doodles on the refrigerator, a plush rabbit for Emma that instantly became her favorite. He'd asked questions about their interests, their school, their friends. He'd seemed genuinely interested. It wasn't until the third month that Noah began noticing the subtle shift. How Dennis's attention would drift when Rebecca left the room. How his questions became perfunctory, his responses shorter. Nothing dramatic, just a gradual cooling, a revealing of his true level of interest. Noah? Noah! Emma's voice yanked him from his thoughts. The cartoon's over. Can we do something else now? Noah blinked, realizing he'd been staring at his phone screen without seeing it for several minutes. Oh sure. What do you want to do? Can we play a game? Like Candyland? We could, Noah said, glancing toward the stairs where the sound of the shower running had stopped. Let's ask Dennis first, though. There's a movie showing at 1:15 if he wants to take us. As if on cue, Dennis appeared on the stairs, dressed in fresh clothes, dark jeans, and a gray button-down shirt that he left untucked in a calculated casual look. His hair was still damp from the shower, and he smelled strongly of cologne. Hey, there are the Munchkins, he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. What are you two plotting down here? Noah found a movie time, Emma announced, bouncing slightly on her toes. Can we go? Please. Dennis glanced at his watch again, a habit that Noah had noticed he repeated frequently, especially when they were talking to him. What time? There's a showing at 1:15, Noah said. It's about an hour and a half long. Dennis seemed to consider this calculations running behind his eyes. That could work. I've got a call at 11 that shouldn't take more than half an hour. We could grab lunch after the movie. With popcorn during? Emma asked hopefully. Dennis laughed, reaching out to ruffle her hair in a gesture that made her shrink back slightly. Can't have a movie without popcorn, right? That's practically illegal. While Dennis retreated to the kitchen for his business call, Noah and Emma settled in for more cartoons, though Noah found himself unable to focus on the colorful antics on screen. Instead, his mind kept circling back to the subtle ways Emma responded to Dennis. The slight flinch when he moved too quickly, the way she spoke more quietly around him, the hesitations. Small things that their mother, exhausted and grateful for Dennis's help, never seemed to notice. The morning crawled by with Dennis on his phone in the kitchen, occasionally raising his voice enough for fragments to drift into the living room. No, that's not acceptable. I was very clear about the terms. Well, they'll have to adjust their expectations. By noon, Emma was growing restless, her usual boundless energy confined to the living room making her fidgety. Can we go outside? She whispered to Noah. Just in the backyard? Noah glanced toward the kitchen where Dennis's voice had finally fallen silent. Let me check if he's done with his call. He found Dennis sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone with a sour expression. Dennis? Is it okay if Emma and I play in the backyard for a bit before we leave for the movie? Dennis looked up, seeming annoyed at the interruption. Yeah, whatever. Just don't get dirty before we go out in public. He checked his watch yet again. We should leave around 12:45 to make the movie. We'll be ready, Noah promised, backing out of the kitchen before Dennis could change his mind. The backyard was small but had enough space for a modest swing set that their father had installed when Emma was 3. Though she had nearly outgrown it, the familiar motion of swinging still brought her joy. Noah pushed her gently, watching as her hair flew back and forth with each arc. Her face tilted toward the autumn sun that filtered through the maple trees surrounding their yard. Higher, she called, pumping her legs to gain momentum. Not too high, Noah cautioned. Remember what happened last time? Emma giggled. I flew like a superhero. You fell and scraped your knee, Noah corrected, though he couldn't help smiling at her selective memory. Mom had to use 3 Band-Aids. Still felt like flying, Emma insisted, stretching her feet toward the sky. Beyond their backyard fence, the neighborhood was quiet for a Saturday morning. A few houses down, someone was mowing their lawn, the distant buzz forming a backdrop to their play. On the other side of their fence, the Morgans' yard sat empty, their dog presumably inside or in the front yard where he was sometimes chained during nice weather. Noah was grateful for Brutus's absence. The massive Rottweiler had been a source of anxiety since the Morgans moved in last year. Mr. Morgan worked construction and Mrs. Morgan was a real estate agent who was rarely home. Their dog seemed to be an afterthought in their busy lives, fed and housed but given little attention or training. The result was an animal that barked aggressively at everything that moved, straining at his chain whenever Noah and Emma passed by. Noah, Emma said suddenly, dragging her feet to slow the swing. "I don't like Dennis's eyes." The statement, so unexpected and yet somehow perfectly aligned with Noah's own unspoken feelings, caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" Emma frowned, searching for words to express a concept beyond her vocabulary. They don't match his mouth when he smiles. Like he's wearing a mask but forgot to put holes for his eyes." A chill ran through Noah despite the warm October sun. "You shouldn't say things like that, Em. Dennis is Mom's friend. She really likes him." "I know." Emma kicked at the dirt beneath the swing, creating small dust clouds. "But you don't like him either." It wasn't a question. Noah shifted uncomfortably, torn between honesty with his sister and loyalty to their mother. "It doesn't matter what I think," he said finally. "Mom's happy, and that's what's important." Emma considered this, her small face serious. "But you always tell me to be honest about my feelings." "This is different," Noah said, wishing he could explain the complicated adult world of compromises and imperfect solutions. "Sometimes we have to adjust to things changing. For Mom's sake." Before Emma could pursue this line of conversation further, the back door opened, and Dennis stepped onto the small patio. "Time to wrap it up, kids. We need to leave for the movie in 15 minutes. Emma hopped off the swing, her previous concerns seemingly forgotten in the excitement of the upcoming outing. "I need to get Hoppy," she declared, racing past Dennis into the house to retrieve her stuffed rabbit. Noah followed more slowly, acutely aware of Dennis's evaluating gaze as he passed. "You're good with her," Dennis observed unexpectedly. "Very parental." Noah wasn't sure if this was a compliment or a criticism. "She's my sister." "Still," Dennis said, his tone unreadable. "Most 9-year-old boys wouldn't have the patience." Noah shrugged, uncomfortable with the assessment. "I don't mind." Dennis studied him for a moment longer, then checked his watch again. "Get your shoes on. I'll wait in the car." The trip to the movie theater passed in relative silence. Dennis drove with one hand on the wheel, the other occupied with his phone at red lights. From the back seat, Emma clutched Hoppy to her chest and watched the familiar streets of Maple Creek give way to the more commercial area near the mall. Noah sat beside her, gazing out the window at the passing scenery. The coffee shop where their father used to take them for hot chocolate on cold days. The park where they'd had a picnic last summer when their mother had a rare day off. At the theater, Dennis purchased their tickets with the money Rebecca had left, adding a large popcorn and sodas without prompting. As they settled into their seats in the darkened theater, Noah felt some of his tension ease. For the next 90 minutes, they could all just sit in the dark and watch animated animals have adventures. No conversations required, no navigating the complex emotional terrain that Dennis's presence created. Emma sat between them, happily munching popcorn as the previews played. She'd placed Hoppy in the seat beside her, adjusted so the stuffed rabbit could see the screen. The small gesture made Noah smile despite his lingering unease. The movie itself was better than Noah had expected, a story about young forest ranger animals protecting their wilderness from environmental threats. Emma was entranced from the opening scene, her eyes wide as she absorbed the colorful animation and heartfelt message. Even Dennis seemed reasonably engaged, though he checked his phone several times during slower moments, the bright screen briefly illuminating his profile in the darkness. When the credits rolled and the lights came up, Emma was bubbling with excitement. "That was the best movie ever. Did you see when the little bear cub stood up to the big machines? He was so brave." "Very brave," Noah agreed, helping her collect Hoppy and her empty popcorn bag. "Not bad," Dennis added, standing and stretching. "The animation was pretty good." He checked his watch, an automatic gesture that Noah was beginning to find irritating. "We should grab something to eat. I'm starving." They ended up at a burger place in the mall food court, a compromise between Emma's request for ice cream and Dennis's desire for real food. Noah helped Emma unwrap her cheeseburger while Dennis went to get extra napkins, removing the pickles she disliked and cutting the sandwich into more manageable quarters. "The little bear reminded me of you," Emma said, dipping a French fry into ketchup. "Always trying to fix things and protect everyone." Noah smiled, touched by the comparison. I think you're more like the fox. Smart and quick. And pretty, Emma added with a giggle. Definitely pretty, Noah agreed. When Dennis returned to the table, he had a fresh beer in his hand along with the napkins. Noah noticed but said nothing, focusing instead on his own food. One beer with lunch wasn't concerning. His father used to have beer with weekend meals sometimes too. So, Dennis said between bites of his burger, what's the plan for the rest of the day? You kids have homework or something? We did it yesterday, Noah answered. We usually do our weekend homework on Fridays, so we have the rest of the weekend free. Dennis nodded approvingly. Smart. Your mom's got you well trained. The phrasing made Noah bristle internally, but he kept his expression neutral. Emma might want to go to the park later. There's one near our house with a good playground. The one with the big slide. Emma chimed in, her mouth full of French fries. Dennis took a long sip of his beer. We'll see. I've got some work emails to catch up on when we get back. By the time they returned to the Wilson house, it was nearly 4 o'clock. The afternoon had turned cloudy, the earlier sunshine giving way to a gray sky that threatened rain. Dennis immediately headed for the kitchen with his laptop, setting up a makeshift office at the table while Noah and Emma retreated to the living room. Can we still go to the park? Emma asked in a whisper, glancing toward the kitchen. Noah looked out the window at the darkening sky. I don't think so, Em. Looks like it might rain soon. Seeing her disappointment, he added, we could build a blanket fort instead. Play inside where it's warm. This suggestion brightened her mood considerably. They spent the next hour constructing an elaborate fort in the living room, using the couch cushions as foundations and draping blankets over chairs to create a cozy hideaway. Dennis remained in the kitchen, the steady clicking of his laptop keys punctuated by occasional sighs or muttered comments to himself. Inside their fort, Noah and Emma created an imaginary world inspired by the movie they'd just seen. Emma's stuffed animals became the characters. Hoppy was the brave leader, of course, and they were on a mission to save their forest home from mysterious intruders. The bad guys are coming, Emma whispered dramatically, making her toy dinosaur stomp toward the rabbit. Quick, Ranger Hoppy, use your special powers. Noah manipulated a small teddy bear to come to Hoppy's defense. Don't worry, I'll help you. Their play continued uninterrupted until a sharp crack of thunder made Emma jump, her eyes going wide with alarm. Outside, rain had begun to fall, pattering against the windows with increasing intensity. It's okay, Noah assured her. Just a storm. We're safe in our fort. In the kitchen, they heard Dennis's phone ring, followed by his voice answering. The conversation quickly grew heated, his tone sharp and annoyed. That's not what we agreed to. No, listen to me. I don't care what Johnson said. The timeline was clear. Emma looked toward the kitchen, her enjoyment of their game fading as Dennis's voice rose. Is he mad? She whispered. Not at us, Noah assured her. He's just talking about work stuff. But the happy mood of their fort had been punctured. Emma's play became half-hearted, her attention divided between their game and the angry voice from the kitchen. When Dennis suddenly stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, she flinched. Unbelievable, they heard him mutter. Then, I need a drink. Noah tensed as he heard the refrigerator door open, followed by the distinct sound of a beer can being opened. It wasn't the first. There had been the one at lunch, and Noah had noticed another when they first returned home. Not excessive, perhaps, but enough to make him wary. Let's play something else, Noah suggested, trying to recapture Emma's attention. How about if we draw some pictures? I can get your crayons. This distraction worked better. They spread paper on the floor inside their fort, Emma coloring a scene from the movie while Noah sketched absently, his pencil creating the outlines of the forest animals they'd seen on screen. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows and thunder rolling across the sky at regular intervals. Dennis appeared in the living room doorway, beer in hand, surveying their fort with an expression that hovered between amusement and annoyance. Quite the construction project you've got going here. We're making a ranger station, Emma explained, holding up her drawing. For the animal forest rangers. I see, Dennis said, taking a sip of his beer. Well, don't make too big a mess. Your mom will be home tomorrow night, and we should keep the place looking decent for her. We'll clean it up, Noah promised quickly. We always do. Dennis nodded, his attention already drifting. I'm going to watch the game in your mom's room. There's leftover pizza in the fridge when you get hungry. After he'd gone upstairs, Emma looked at Noah with a question in her eyes. Mom's room. Noah understood her confusion. Their mother's bedroom had always been a somewhat private space, especially since their father left. They were allowed in, of course, but it was understood to be her sanctuary, her personal retreat from the demands of work and parenting. It's okay, Noah said, not entirely believing it himself. He's just going to watch TV. The rest of the evening passed quietly. They ate reheated pizza on paper plates in their fort, then watched cartoons until Emma's eyelids began to droop. Noah guided her through their evening routine, brushing teeth, washing face, changing into pajamas, all while the storm continued outside, turning their windows into running waterways and making the house creak and groan. Upstairs, the sound of the television could be heard from their mother's room. Some sports game with announcers whose voices rose and fell with the action. Occasionally, they heard Dennis's footsteps as he went downstairs to the kitchen, followed by the sound of the refrigerator opening. Noah tried not to keep count. As he tucked Emma into bed, she clutched Hoppy tightly against her chest. I don't like storms, she whispered. I know, Noah said softly, but we're safe inside, and they never last forever. Try to think about the movie instead. All those brave animals protecting their forest. Like you protect me, Emma murmured, her eyes already closing. The simple statement hit Noah with unexpected force, a mixture of pride and pressure that tightened his chest. That's right, he whispered. Always. He stayed beside her until her breathing deepened into sleep, watching the shadows from the nightlight dance on her peaceful face. Outside, the storm showed no signs of abating, and down the hall, Dennis was on his fourth, or was it fifth, trip to the kitchen. Noah climbed into his own bed but didn't immediately try to sleep. Instead, he opened his sketchbook, turning to the drawing he'd been working on the night before. In the dim light, the protective boy and the shadowy threat seemed more real somehow, more immediate. He added details to the drawing, the boy's face more determined, his stance stronger. The small girl behind him now clearly holding a stuffed animal. The shadow more defined, not quite human but not quite animal either. Something in between, something unpredictable. Through the wall, Noah could hear the Morgan's dog barking again, the sound barely audible over the storm but persistent. He wondered if the dog was frightened of the thunder or simply angry at being left outside in the rain. The Morgan's car wasn't in their driveway when they'd returned from the movie, suggesting they were out for the evening. From downstairs came the sound of glass breaking, followed by a muffled curse. Noah tensed, listening for any indication that he needed to investigate. After a moment of silence, he heard Dennis's footsteps, then the sound of something being swept up. Just an accident, then. Nothing to worry about, except that Noah was worried. Not about broken glass, but about tomorrow, another full day with Dennis, who had been drinking steadily since lunchtime and whose mood had darkened with each phone call and email. He wondered if he should text his mother, but immediately dismissed the idea. What would he say? Dennis took us to a movie and bought us lunch. He's watching sports and had a few beers. Nothing alarming there. Nothing that would justify interrupting her at work. Still, a knot of unease had settled in Noah's stomach, a familiar feeling of responsibility pressing down on his 9-year-old shoulders. He closed his sketchbook and set it aside, then lay down and pulled his blanket up to his chin, listening to the rain and the distant thunder and the occasional creak of footsteps on the stairs. Tomorrow, he decided he would suggest they visit Mrs. Jenkins. She had mentioned garden work that needed doing, bulbs to be planted before the first frost. Emma would enjoy digging in the dirt, and Mrs. Jenkins always had cookies or some other treat for them. It would give them somewhere to go, somewhere that wasn't here with Dennis's increasingly frequent trips to the refrigerator. With this plan in mind, Noah finally allowed himself to drift toward sleep, the sound of the storm gradually fading into the background of his consciousness. His last thought before slipping away was of his drawing, the boy with his arms outstretched, standing firm against the approaching shadow. In the room down the hall, the television continued to play, its blue light flickering against the walls as the storm raged outside, bringing with it a darkness that seemed to seep into the very corners of the quiet house. Sunday morning arrived with lingering puddles across the yard and a heavy dampness in the air. The storm had passed sometime after midnight, leaving behind a washed-out world that seemed muted and subdued. Noah woke early, the gray light seeping through his curtains barely distinguishable from darkness. He lay still for a moment, listening to the house. Emma's soft breathing came from her bed across the room, steady and reassuring. Beyond that, silence. No television, no footsteps, no clinking bottles. He wondered if Dennis was still asleep in their mother's room. The digital clock read 6:42 a.m. Too early to wake Emma, but Noah felt too restless to go back to sleep. He slipped out of bed quietly and changed into jeans and a green sweater that his grandmother had sent for his birthday. The air felt chilly, the autumn cold settling in more firmly after the storm. In the hallway, he paused outside his mother's bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and he could hear soft snoring from within. Moving with careful steps, Noah continued downstairs, wincing at each creak of the old wooden staircase. The living room still held evidence of yesterday's activities, their blanket fort partially collapsed, Emma's crayons scattered on the floor beside her drawings. In the kitchen, Noah found what he'd been dreading. Empty beer cans on the counter, more than he'd estimated from the sounds last night. Next to the sink, fragments of what must have been a glass had been swept into a small pile but not thrown away. Noah quietly disposed of the glass pieces, then gathered the beer cans and placed them in the recycling bin under the sink. His father had sometimes had a few beers on weekends too, but never this many, never with this sense of, what was the word? Desperation, maybe. The kind of drinking that seemed less about enjoyment and more about escaping something. Once the kitchen was cleaned up, Noah set about making himself a simple breakfast toast with peanut butter and a glass of orange juice. He ate standing by the window, watching as the neighborhood gradually awakened. Across the street, Mrs. Jenkins's lights were already on. The elderly woman rose with the sun regardless of the day, a habit from decades of early morning routines. Noah finished his breakfast and washed his dishes, then returned to the living room to clean up their fort. He carefully folded the blankets and replaced the couch cushions, gathering Emma's drawings and art supplies into a neat pile. By the time he was done, the rising sun had brightened the room considerably, illuminating dust motes that danced in the beams of light. The sound of a door opening upstairs sent a jolt of tension through Noah's body. Heavy footsteps crossed the hallway, followed by the bathroom door closing. Dennis was awake. Noah quickly moved to the television, turning it on and lowering the volume to a background murmur. Being caught doing nothing somehow felt risky this morning. When Dennis finally came downstairs nearly 20 minutes later, Noah was sitting on the couch, pretending to be absorbed in a nature documentary about sea turtles. "Morning," Dennis muttered, his voice rough with sleep. He looked disheveled, his hair sticking up on one side and yesterday's clothes wrinkled from being slept in. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usual confident posture was replaced by a slight stoop. "Is there coffee?" "I don't think so," Noah answered cautiously. "Mom usually makes it, but I can try if you want." Dennis shook his head, wincing slightly at the movement. "Never mind. I'll handle it." He shuffled into the kitchen while Noah remained frozen on the couch, unsure whether to follow or stay put. From his position, he could see Dennis moving with slow, deliberate steps, filling the coffee maker with water and measuring grounds with unsteady hands. While the coffee brewed, Dennis leaned against the counter, eyes closed and one hand pressed to his temple. Noah recognized the signs of a hangover from the rare occasions he'd seen his father in a similar state after holiday parties. The difference was that his father had always been sheepish and apologetic the next morning, making pancakes for everyone and talking too loudly to compensate for his discomfort. Dennis just looked angry, as if his headache were someone else's fault. By the time Emma came downstairs around 8 o'clock, clutching Hoppy and still in her pajamas, Dennis had consumed 2 cups of black coffee and was starting to look marginally more human. He sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone with the intense focus of someone avoiding direct eye contact with the world. "Good morning," Emma said, her voice bright but cautious as she spotted Dennis at the table. "Morning, kiddo," Dennis replied without looking up. "Your brother's watching TV if you want to join him." Emma hesitated, then came to Noah on the couch instead of heading for the kitchen. "I'm hungry," she whispered. "I'll get you some breakfast," Noah offered, standing up. "Cereal okay?" She nodded, settling into his warm spot on the couch and turning her attention to the sea turtles on screen. In the kitchen, Noah moved efficiently, preparing Emma's cereal and adding sliced banana just as he had yesterday. Dennis remained at the table, a silent presence that Noah navigated around with careful precision, like avoiding trip wires. "Any plans for today?" Dennis finally asked as Noah was pouring milk over the cereal. "I thought maybe we could help Mrs. Jenkins in her garden," Noah suggested, keeping his voice casual. "She mentioned yesterday that she needs to plant some bulbs before it gets too cold." Dennis looked up for the first time, his bloodshot eyes narrowing slightly. "The old lady across the street? You want to spend your Sunday digging in the dirt?" Noah shrugged, trying to maintain his nonchalance. "Emma likes gardening, and Mrs. Jenkins usually bakes cookies or something." Dennis took another sip of his coffee. "Maybe later. I've got some work to finish up this morning." It wasn't a no, which Noah counted as a partial victory. He brought Emma her breakfast, then sat beside her on the couch while she ate and watched the documentary. On screen, baby turtles were making their perilous journey from their hatching site to the ocean, many being snatched up by predatory birds along the way. "That's sad," Emma commented around a mouthful of cereal. "Why don't the mama turtles help them?" "They can't," Noah explained. "Sea turtles lay their eggs and then have to go back to the ocean. The babies have to make it on their own." Emma frowned, her 5-year-old sense of justice offended by this arrangement. "I don't like that. Mamas should help their babies." "Some animals are different from people," Noah said gently. "They have different ways of taking care of their young." The morning progressed slowly. Dennis remained at the kitchen table with his laptop, making occasional phone calls in a low, controlled voice that suggested he was still battling his headache. Emma and Noah stayed in the living room, moving from the documentary to a board game played quietly on the floor. By noon, the day had warmed considerably, the sun burning through the morning clouds to create a crisp, beautiful autumn Sunday. Through the windows, Noah could see neighbors emerging to rake leaves or wash cars, taking advantage of the fair weather after yesterday's storm. "Can we go outside now?" Emma asked, peering longingly through the window. "The grass is probably dry enough." Noah glanced toward the kitchen. Dennis had been on his laptop for over 3 hours, his mood gradually improving with each cup of coffee but still far from cheerful. "Let me ask," he said cautiously. He approached the kitchen with measured steps. "Dennis, the weather's nice now. Is it okay if Emma and I play in the backyard for a while?" Dennis looked up, seeming almost surprised to find that the children were still in the house. "Yeah, sure. Just stay where I can see you if I look out the window." Relieved, Noah returned to Emma with the good news. They put on their shoes and light jackets, then headed out the back door into the sun-dappled yard. The grass was still damp in spots, but the wooden swing set had dried in the morning sun. Emma immediately headed for the swings, her energy pent up from the morning's indoor confinement. "Push me, Noah," he obliged, standing behind her and giving gentle pushes that sent her flying forward, her delighted giggles carrying across the yard. The simple joy of the moment, his sister's happiness, the fresh air, the temporary escape from the tense atmosphere inside, made Noah feel lighter than he had all weekend. After swinging, they played an improvised game of hopscotch using sticks to draw squares on a dry patch of dirt, then explored the far corner of the yard where a small vegetable garden, now mostly harvested except for a few late pumpkins, had been their mother's summer project. "Can we check on Mrs. Jenkins' garden from here?" Emma asked, standing on tiptoe to peer over the fence that separated their yard from the side street. Their yard was on a corner lot, with the main street running along the front of the house and a quieter side street along the left boundary. Mrs. Jenkins lived directly across this side street, her blue house and meticulous garden visible from their yard. "I can see her working out front," Noah confirmed, being tall enough to see over the fence without straining. "She's planting those bulbs she mentioned. Can we go help her?" "Please." Emma bounced on her toes. "She said we could." Noah hesitated, glancing back at their house. Through the kitchen window, he could see Dennis still at the table, his attention focused on his laptop. "Maybe in a little while. Let's play here some more first." They continued their outdoor activities, making the most of the sunshine and freedom. Emma found a caterpillar on one of the remaining pumpkin leaves and spent several minutes creating a home for it using twigs and fallen leaves. Noah sat cross-legged beside her, watching her careful construction work with a fond smile. "If we take care of it, will it turn into a butterfly?" she asked seriously. "Well, caterpillars do turn into butterflies or moths," Noah explained. "But they need to do it in their natural habitat. If we keep it, it might not have what it needs to transform properly." Emma considered this, then carefully returned the caterpillar to the pumpkin plant. "You can stay with your family," she told it solemnly. "It's better that way." The simple wisdom in her statement made Noah's throat tighten unexpectedly. He stood up quickly. "Want to check out the other side of the yard? We haven't been over there yet today." They moved toward the right side of the property, which bordered the Morgans' yard. The chain-link fence that separated the two properties was old and sagging in places, with vines growing through it in others. Noah automatically kept Emma a safe distance from the boundary, a habit formed from months of wary coexistence with Brutus. "I wonder where the dog is," Emma said, voicing Noah's thoughts. "He's usually barking by now. Maybe they took him somewhere," Noah suggested hopefully. "Or he could be inside because of the rain yesterday." As if summoned by their discussion, a deep, resonant bark suddenly sounded from the Morgans' yard. Emma instinctively moved closer to Noah, her eyes widening. "It's okay," Noah assured her, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "He's on his chain, and the fence is between us." They watched as Brutus emerged from the Morgans' back porch, a massive dark shape against the weathered wood of the house. The Rottweiler moved with powerful strides to the limit of his chain, which was attached to a metal stake driven into the ground near the fence line. When he spotted the children, his barking intensified, his deep voice echoing across both yards. "Let's go back to the swing," Noah suggested, gently turning Emma away from the fence. "We don't want to bother him." As they retreated, the back door of their house opened, and Dennis stepped out onto the small concrete patio. He had a fresh cup of coffee in one hand and his phone in the other, and his expression suggested he was not pleased by the dog's barking. "That thing never shuts up," he commented as Noah and Emma approached. "Doesn't it drive you nuts?" "We try to play on the other side of the yard," Noah explained, "away from the fence." Dennis took a sip of his coffee, his gaze moving to the still barking dog. "What's the deal with the neighbors? They just let it bark all day." "They work a lot," Noah said with a small shrug. "The dog gets lonely, I think." Dennis continued to study the animal with narrowed eyes. "Vicious-looking beast. Rottweilers can be dangerous if they're not trained properly." "That's why we stay away from the fence," Noah said quickly. "Mom told us never to try to pet him or anything." Dennis nodded absently, then seemed to make a sudden decision. "I'm gonna stretch my legs. Been sitting too long." He drained the last of his coffee and set the mug on the patio table. "You two keep playing. I'm just gonna walk around the yard a bit." Noah watched warily as Dennis began a slow circuit of the backyard, his hands in his pockets and his gaze sweeping over the property as if assessing its value. When he approached the side of the yard that bordered the Morgans, Noah tensed, instinctively moving to keep Emma engaged with the swing set. "Higher, Noah," she called, oblivious to the potential situation developing across the yard. Noah pushed her half-heartedly, his attention divided between his sister and Dennis, who had stopped near the fence, watching Brutus with an unreadable expression. The dog's barking had taken on a more aggressive quality, his powerful body straining against the chain that held him several feet from the boundary. "Dennis," Noah called, unable to contain his concern. "The dog doesn't like strangers near the fence." Dennis glanced back with a dismissive wave. "I'm not doing anything, just looking." But he didn't move away. Instead, he took a step closer to the fence, his posture changing subtly, shoulders squaring, chin lifting in what seemed like a challenge. Brutus responded immediately, his barking becoming a deep, rumbling growl punctuated by sharp barks that sounded like warnings. "Emma, stay on the swing," Noah instructed firmly, then jogged across the yard toward Dennis. "He gets really upset sometimes," he explained as he approached. "The Morgans said we should just stay back." Dennis turned to him with an expression that made Noah instinctively stop a few feet away. It wasn't anger exactly, but something colder, more calculating. "You're afraid of this dog, aren't you?" The question caught Noah off guard. "I just respect that he's big and doesn't know us," he answered carefully. "Mom says all dogs should be treated as potentially dangerous until you know them well." "Smart mom," Dennis commented, his tone suggesting something other than simple agreement. "But you know what? Dogs can smell fear. It makes them think they're the boss." He turned back toward Brutus, who continued his aggressive display. "Sometimes you have to show them who's really in charge." Before Noah could respond, Dennis picked up a small stick from the ground and tossed it lightly toward the fence. It landed in the dirt on their side, but the motion caused Brutus to lunge forward, teeth bared and barking furiously. "See that?" Dennis said, a strange smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "All bluster. He knows he can't get through that fence." "Please don't," Noah said, his voice smaller than he intended. "It just makes him more agitated." Dennis looked down at him, his smile fading. "You really are scared, aren't you? 9 years old and jumping at a dog that can't even reach you." He shook his head slightly. "Your dad teach you to be so timid?" The mention of his father sent a wave of heat through Noah's chest. "I'm not timid," he said, his voice steadier now. "I'm careful. There's a difference." "Is there?" Dennis picked up another stick, this one longer and thicker than the first. "Seems to me that careful is just what people call scared when they don't want to admit it." He tossed the second stick, this time with more force. It sailed over the fence, landing in the Morgans' yard just beyond Brutus's reach. The dog went into a frenzy, lunging at the stick and then at the fence, his chain pulling taut with each powerful movement. "Stop it," Noah protested, more forcefully this time. "You're making him crazy." From across the yard, Emma called out, "Noah? What's happening?" "Nothing, he called back, trying to keep his voice light. "Just stay on the swing, okay?" Dennis was watching the dog with a look of detached fascination, as if conducting some sort of experiment. "Interesting how easily they lose control," he remarked. "All that domestication, and they're still just animals underneath." Noah felt a creeping sense of dread. There was something wrong in Dennis's tone, something that went beyond simple taunting or thoughtlessness. He seemed to be enjoying the dog's distress, the power he held to provoke such a reaction. "We should go back to the house," Noah suggested, trying to sound reasonable rather than frightened. "It's almost lunchtime anyway." Dennis ignored him, picking up a small stone this time. "You know what your problem is, Noah? You let things intimidate you too easily. Life's gonna walk all over you if you don't toughen up." He threw the stone, which hit the fence with a metallic ping before falling to the ground. Brutus snapped at it through the chain links, his rage now fully ignited. "Please stop," Noah said, abandoning any pretense of casualness. "You're going to get him in trouble with his owners if he keeps barking like this." Dennis turned to him fully then, his expression hardening. "You telling me what to do, kid?" "No," Noah backpedaled quickly. I just meant, because it sure sounds like you think you know better than me. Dennis took a step toward Noah, who instinctively retreated. You've been watching me like a hawk all weekend, judging everything I do. Think I haven't noticed? Noah's mouth went dry. I wasn't. Your mom warned me you might be difficult. Said you were having trouble adjusting. Dennis's voice had dropped to a near whisper, making Noah strain to hear him over Brutus's continued barking. But I've been patient, haven't I? Took you to the movies, bought you lunch. And this is the thanks I get, a 9-year-old questioning my judgment. Behind them, Emma called again, her voice higher now, tinged with concern. Noah? I want to go inside now. In a minute, Noah called back, not daring to take his eyes off Dennis. We should check on her, he added quietly. Dennis's jaw tightened, but after a moment he nodded. Fine, go ahead. As Noah turned to move away, Dennis added, You know, your mom's going to be disappointed when I tell her how disrespectful you've been this weekend. The thinly veiled threat stopped Noah in his tracks. He knew how much his mother valued Dennis's help, how grateful she was for the companionship and support he provided. The thought of causing problems for her made his chest ache. I'm sorry if I seemed disrespectful, he said carefully. I didn't mean to be. Dennis studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. We'll see. Go on, check on your sister. Noah hurried across the yard to Emma, who was sitting motionless on the swing, her small face pinched with worry. What's happening? She asked as he approached. Why is Dennis making the dog bark? It's okay, Noah assured her, though he felt anything but certain. He was just looking at the fence. Do you want to go inside now? She nodded emphatically. I don't like how loud the dog is, and I need to use the bathroom. Let's go, then. Noah took her hand, leading her toward the house while keeping an eye on Dennis, who remained by the fence, watching the dog with that same unsettling fascination. Inside, Noah helped Emma wash her hands, then suggested she watch TV while he prepared lunch. As he assembled simple sandwiches in the kitchen, he could still hear Brutus barking outside, the sound only slightly muffled by the walls of the house. Through the window, he could see Dennis still standing by the fence, now holding what appeared to be one of the small sports balls from the collection in their garage. A sick feeling settled in Noah's stomach. He should text his mother, tell her what was happening. But what exactly would he say? Dennis is teasing the neighbor's dog? It sounded so trivial when framed that way, yet the underlying wrongness of the situation was impossible to ignore. He finished making the sandwiches and called Emma to the table. As they ate, the barking outside finally began to subside, suggesting that Dennis had ceased his provocations. A few minutes later, the back door opened, and Dennis stepped inside, looking flushed and oddly energized. That mutt finally shut up, he announced, heading for the refrigerator. He pulled out a beer, popping the tab with a sharp crack that made Noah flinch. What's for lunch? We're having sandwiches, Noah answered, gesturing to the plate he'd prepared and left on the counter. Turkey and cheese. Dennis inspected the offering with a slight curl of his lip. No chips? No side dish. We have pretzels, Noah offered, already moving to retrieve the bag from the pantry. And there are apples if you want one. Pretzels are fine. Dennis took his sandwich and beer to the table, sitting across from Emma, who was eating quietly with her eyes downcast. What's the matter, Squirt? Cat got your tongue. Emma glanced up briefly, then returned her gaze to her plate. I'm just hungry, she mumbled. Dennis shrugged and took a large bite of his sandwich, washing it down with a swig of beer. So what's the plan for the afternoon? More swinging and running around. Actually, Noah said, choosing his words carefully, I was thinking we might go help Mrs. Jenkins with her garden for a while. She really seemed to need the help. And, the old lady again, Dennis interrupted, his tone dismissive. What is it with you and this neighbor? Noah hesitated, unsure how to navigate Dennis's apparent irritation. She's nice to us, and she makes good cookies. Cookies, Dennis repeated flatly. That's your big motivation? Sweet treats from an old woman. It's not just that, Noah tried to explain. She's been our friend since we were little. And she used to help Mom a lot when Dad first left. A flash of something, calculation, perhaps across Dennis's face at the mention of their father. I see. Well, I suppose a little garden work won't kill anyone. He finished his beer in one long drink, then stood to get another. But first, I want to check on that dog situation again. Something's not right with that chain setup. Noah's heart sank. What do you mean? It looked worn in spots. Unsafe. Dennis popped open his second beer. If that dog got loose, it could be dangerous for the neighborhood. Kids like you two walking around. But the Morgans have had him on that chain for ages, Noah protested weakly. It's always been fine. Dennis gave him a look that clearly conveyed his opinion of Noah's assessment. Finish your lunch. I'm going to take another look. He headed back outside with his fresh beer, leaving Noah and Emma at the table. As soon as the door closed behind him, Emma leaned forward. I don't want to stay here, she whispered urgently. Can we please go to Mrs. Jenkins' house now? Noah glanced out the window. Dennis was indeed heading back toward the fence, his posture suggesting renewed interest in provoking the dog. Okay, he decided suddenly. Get your jacket. We'll tell Dennis we're going across the street. They hurriedly cleared their plates, then retrieved their jackets from the hooks by the back door. Through the window, Noah could see that Dennis had resumed his taunting of Brutus, this time bouncing the small rubber ball just on their side of the fence, causing the dog to lunge repeatedly against his restraint. We'll go out the front door, Noah decided, not wanting to walk across the yard and past Dennis in his current state. Come on. They slipped out the front of the house and hurried across the main street to Mrs. Jenkins' blue house with its white picket fence. The elderly woman was indeed in her front garden, kneeling on a padded mat as she carefully planted bulbs in a freshly turned flower bed. She looked up at their approach, a smile lighting her weathered face. Well, hello there, Wilson children. What a lovely surprise. Hi, Mrs. Jenkins, Noah said, his relief at being away from their own yard making his voice more eager than intended. We came to help with the bulbs like you mentioned. Mrs. Jenkins studied their faces for a moment, her smile fading slightly. Everything all right across the street? Your mother's boyfriend is watching you today, isn't he? Dennis, Emma supplied, her small face serious. He's being mean to the dog next door. Noah shot his sister a warning look. He's just investigating something with the fence, he amended. We thought we'd come help you while he does that. Mrs. Jenkins nodded slowly, her eyes moving past them to the Wilson house, where Dennis was not visible from this angle. Well, I certainly could use the help. These old knees aren't what they used to be. She patted the ground beside her. Emma, would you like to help me put these tulip bulbs in the holes I've dug? And Noah, there's a bag of daffodil bulbs on the porch that we could start on next. They fell into a comfortable rhythm of gardening work, the familiar activity and Mrs. Jenkins' gentle conversation helping to ease the tension that had built up over the morning. Emma delighted in carefully placing each bulb in its prepared hole, pointy side up as instructed, while Noah dug small trenches for the daffodils along the border of the property. These will be beautiful in spring, Mrs. Jenkins told them as they worked. Yellow daffodils and red tulips, all in a row. A symphony of color after the winter gray. Will we get to see them? Emma asked, patting soil over a bulb with careful attention. Of course, dear. You can come visit them whenever you like. Perhaps your mother can bring you when they start to bloom. Noah worked steadily, grateful for the physical task that kept his hands busy and his mind partly distracted. Still, he couldn't help glancing across the street every few minutes, watching for any sign of Dennis coming to look for them. The faint sound of Brutus's barking continued sporadically, suggesting that Dennis was still engaged with the dog. After about half an hour, Mrs. Jenkins straightened up with a small groan, pressing her hands to her lower back. I think it's time for a cookie break, don't you? These old bones need a rest. They followed her into the neat little house, wiping their feet carefully before stepping onto her polished hardwood floors. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and sugar, just as it had 2 days ago when they'd visited after school. "Wash up at the sink, Mrs. Jenkins instructed, setting out a plate of cookies and pouring glasses of milk. "Garden dirt doesn't belong at the table." As they settled around her small kitchen table with snickerdoodles and milk, Mrs. Jenkins regarded them thoughtfully. "Now, why don't you tell me what's really going on? And don't say nothing, Noah Wilson. I've known you since you were in diapers, and I can tell when something's bothering you." Noah hesitated, unsure how much to share. He didn't want to cause problems for his mother, but Mrs. Jenkins had always been a safe person to talk to. "Dennis is just different when Mom's not around," he said finally. "Different how?" Mrs. Jenkins pressed gently. "He ignores us mostly," Noah explained. "But then sometimes he gets, I don't know, kind of mean. Not like hitting or anything," he added quickly, seeing alarm flash across Mrs. Jenkins' face. "Just saying things that don't feel right. And today he started teasing Brutus, throwing things at the fence to make him bark." "He called Noah scared," Emma added, her voice indignant. "But Noah's the bravest person ever. He's just smart about the dog." Mrs. Jenkins nodded gravely. "I see. And your mother is working until tonight." "She gets off at 7, Noah confirmed. "Then she has to drive home, so probably around 7:30. "Well, Mrs. Jenkins said after a thoughtful pause, "why don't you two stay here for a while? We can finish planting the bulbs, and then perhaps play a game inside. I have that checkers set your grandfather gave me that you both enjoy." The offer of sanctuary was so tempting that Noah nearly accepted immediately. But a sense of responsibility held him back. "We should probably let Dennis know where we are," he said reluctantly. "He might be looking for us." "I'll take care of that, Mrs. Jenkins said, rising from her chair with surprising swiftness for her age. "You two enjoy another cookie while I make a quick call." She disappeared into the living room, her cordless phone in hand. Noah could hear the murmur of her voice but couldn't make out the words. He wondered what she was saying to Dennis, how she was framing their extended visit to her house. When she returned a few minutes later, her expression was composed but somehow firmer than before. "All settled," she announced. "I spoke with Mr. Barrow and explained that I'd asked for your help with an important gardening project. He was quite understanding." Noah doubted that Dennis had been as agreeable as Mrs. Jenkins suggested, but he was too relieved at the temporary reprieve to question it. "Thank you," he said simply. They spent another hour working in the garden, completing the bulb planting and then helping Mrs. Jenkins sweep her front walk clear of soil and debris. The afternoon sun was warm on their backs as they worked, and the rhythmic nature of the tasks began to lull Noah into a false sense of security. Perhaps everything would be fine. Perhaps Dennis had moved on from his fixation with Brutus and was now back inside, watching sports or working on his laptop. That fragile hope was shattered by the sudden eruption of frantic barking from across the street. Not the usual aggressive sounds Brutus made, but something more urgent, more panicked. Noah straightened up from his sweeping, turning toward the Wilson house with a sense of foreboding. From their position in Mrs. Jenkins' front yard, they couldn't see into the backyard of their own house, but the barking continued with increasing frenzy. Then, abruptly, it changed to a yelping sound that raised the hair on the back of Noah's neck. "Something's wrong," he said, taking an instinctive step toward the street. Mrs. Jenkins placed a restraining hand on his shoulder. "Stay here with Emma," she instructed firmly. "I'll go see what's happening." But Noah began to protest. "No arguments," Mrs. Jenkins said, her voice taking on an authority that brooked no dissent. "Stay with your sister." She crossed the street with surprising speed for a woman of her age, disappearing around the side of the Wilson house toward the source of the commotion. Noah stood frozen, torn between obedience and the overwhelming urge to follow. Emma moved closer to him, slipping her small hand into his. "Is the dog okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know," Noah answered honestly. "I hope so." They waited in tense silence, the seconds stretching painfully. The barking had stopped, replaced by an eerie quiet that seemed somehow worse. Then, suddenly, shouting, a man's voice raised in anger, followed by Mrs. Jenkins' response, too distant to make out the words but clearly firm. Noah's resolve broke. "Stay right here," he told Emma, guiding her to sit on Mrs. Jenkins' front steps. "Don't move. I'm just going to see what's happening." "Don't leave me," Emma pleaded, clutching his hand tighter. "Just for a minute," Noah promised. "I'll be right back. You can see me the whole time I'm crossing the street." Reluctantly, Emma released his hand, hugging her arms around herself as she perched on the steps. "Be careful," she whispered. Noah jogged across the street, his heart hammering in his chest. As he reached the side of their house, he slowed, moving cautiously toward the backyard. The voices were clearer now, Dennis's raised in defensive anger, Mrs. Jenkins' lower but firm. "None of your business what I do on this property," Dennis was saying. "Rebecca left me in charge here. I seriously doubt she left you in charge of terrorizing the neighbor's dog," Mrs. Jenkins replied, her normally kind voice now like steel. "What were you thinking?" Noah peered around the corner of the house, taking in the scene. Dennis stood near the fence, a garden hose in one hand, the spray nozzle in the other. Water dripped from the fence and puddled in the dirt beneath it. On the other side, Brutus was nowhere to be seen, but the chain that normally secured him lay on the ground, one link clearly separated from the others. Mrs. Jenkins stood a few feet from Dennis, her small frame somehow imposing in her righteous anger. "You deliberately provoked that animal until its chain broke," she was saying. "I saw you from my upstairs window. What if it had gotten through the fence? Those children could have been hurt." "It didn't get through," Dennis retorted, his voice slurring slightly. Empty beer cans lay scattered around the yard, far more than had been there when Noah and Emma left. Noah's stomach clenched at the sight. "The fact remains," Mrs. Jenkins continued, "that your behavior was reckless and irresponsible. Where are the children now?" "How should I know?" Dennis snapped, tossing the hose aside. "They ran off to your place without even telling me. Disrespectful is what it is. They came to help me garden, which I had invited them to do," Mrs. Jenkins replied evenly. "And thank goodness they did, given what's happened here." Noah's mind was racing, trying to understand the scene before him. The broken chain, the water everywhere, Dennis's defensive anger. Then it clicked, the chain had broken, just as Noah had feared, and Brutus had apparently gotten away. Dennis must have used the hose to drive him off. "What happened to Brutus?" Noah asked, stepping into view before he could stop himself. Both adults turned to him with expressions of surprise. Dennis's quickly morphed into annoyance, while Mrs. Jenkins's softened with concern. "Noah," she said, "I thought I told you to stay with Emma." "She's sitting on your front steps," Noah explained, his eyes moving between the adults. "I can see her from here." "Where's Brutus?" Dennis scoffed. "The mutt ran off when his chain broke. Probably halfway to the next county by now." "You broke his chain?" Noah asked, his voice rising despite his efforts to stay calm. "I didn't break anything," Dennis replied, his words running together slightly. "The chain was worn out just like I said. It snapped when the dog lunged at the fence." Mrs. Jenkins made a sound of disbelief. "After you spent the better part of an hour provoking it." "It's not my fault the Morgans don't maintain their pet properly," Dennis insisted. "If anything, I did the neighborhood a favor. That thing was a menace waiting to happen." Noah stared at the broken chain lying in the muddy dirt on the other side of the fence. Something about the clean separation of the links didn't look like normal wear and tear, but he couldn't be sure from this distance. "We need to tell the Morgans," he said, thinking practically. "Their dog is loose somewhere." "Already done," Mrs. Jenkins said. "I called them right after I came over and saw what had happened. They're on their way home now." Dennis's expression darkened. "Great. So now I get to deal with angry neighbors too. Perfect end to a perfect weekend." "Your concern for the loose animal is touching," Mrs. Jenkins said, her voice dripping with sarcasm that she rarely employed. She turned to Noah. Let's go back to Emma. She must be worried. As they turned to leave, Dennis called after them. Hey, where do you think you're going? The kids are supposed to be here with me. Mrs. Jenkins stopped, turning slowly to face him. Mr. Barrow, I don't think you're in any condition to be supervising children right now. They'll stay with me until Rebecca returns. You're welcome to explain the situation to her when she gets home. You can't just take them, Dennis protested, taking a step forward. Rebecca left them in my care. And you've demonstrated precisely how reliable that care is, Mrs. Jenkins replied, placing a protective hand on Noah's shoulder. I've known these children since they were born, and I've known Rebecca even longer. I think she would agree with my assessment of the situation. Dennis stared at them, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. For a moment, Noah thought he might come after them, might force the issue. Then his gaze shifted to something over their shoulders, and his expression changed. Noah turned to see what Dennis was looking at and found Emma standing at the side of the house, her small face pale and frightened. I heard shouting, she said in a small voice. I got scared waiting alone. Oh, sweetheart, Mrs. Jenkins said, extending her free hand toward Emma. Everything's all right. We're just having a grown-up discussion. Emma approached cautiously, her eyes darting between the adults and the fence where Brutus had been. Where's the dog? He got loose, Noah explained gently. But he ran away, so we don't need to worry. Emma's eyes widened. Is he going to come back and get us? No, dear, Mrs. Jenkins assured her. His owners are coming to find him. He's probably just running around the neighborhood. Dennis, watching this exchange, seemed to deflate slightly. His anger gave way to a calculation that Noah recognized from previous interactions, the mental adjustment that occurred when Dennis realized he needed to present a particular image. Listen, he said, his tone suddenly conciliatory. Maybe Mrs. Jenkins is right. You two should go with her for a bit while I clean up here. I'll call your mom and let her know where you are. The abrupt shift made Noah even more uneasy than the anger had. There was something performative about it, a strategic retreat rather than a genuine change of heart. Mrs. Jenkins seemed to sense this too. That's very reasonable of you, Mr. Barrow. I'll take good care of them until Rebecca returns. As they walked away, Noah couldn't resist looking back. Dennis stood watching them, the garden hose still dripping at his feet, surrounded by empty beer cans. In that moment, he didn't look angry or calculating. He looked defeated, and somehow that was the most disturbing image of all. Back at Mrs. Jenkins' house, she settled the children in her living room with glasses of lemonade and a plate of cookies that neither of them felt much like eating. The cozy surroundings that had always felt so safe now seemed fragile, a temporary shelter from the storm that continued to brew across the street. What's going to happen now? Noah asked as Mrs. Jenkins returned from making yet another phone call. Well, she said, settling into her floral armchair. I've spoken with your mother. She's going to try to leave work a bit early. Noah's heart sank. You told her what happened? I gave her the basics, Mrs. Jenkins said carefully. She needed to know why you children were here instead of at home. Is she mad? Emma asked in a small voice. Not at you, dear, Mrs. Jenkins assured her. Not at either of you. She's concerned, that's all. Noah stared down at his untouched lemonade. What about Brutus? Did the Morgans find him? Not yet, Mrs. Jenkins admitted. But they have several neighbors helping look. He can't have gone far. They sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Emma eventually scooted closer to Noah on the sofa, leaning against his side in a gesture that was both seeking and offering comfort. I knew something bad would happen, she whispered, so quietly that Mrs. Jenkins probably couldn't hear. The way Dennis kept looking at the dog. It wasn't right. Noah nodded, unable to find words to reassure her when he'd had the same feeling himself. Instead, he put his arm around her shoulders, holding her close as they waited for whatever would come next. The wait was shorter than expected. Less than an hour later, the sound of a car door slamming drew them to Mrs. Jenkins' front window. Their mother was hurrying across the street, still in her nurse's scrubs, her face tight with worry. Behind her, a police car pulled up in front of the Wilson house. Its lights off, but its presence unmistakable. "Mom's here," Noah said, a complex mix of relief and anxiety washing over him. "And the police." "Police," Emma echoed, her eyes growing even wider. "Is Dennis in trouble?" Before Noah could answer, the front door opened, and Rebecca rushed in, her gaze immediately finding her children. "Noah, Emma," she breathed, dropping to her knees and opening her arms. They ran to her, both colliding with her embrace at once. She hugged them fiercely, one arm around each child, her face buried in Emma's hair. "Are you okay? Both of you?" "We're fine, Mom," Noah assured her, breathing in the familiar hospital scent that clung to her scrubs. "We were here with Mrs. Jenkins the whole time." Rebecca pulled back, her eyes searching their faces as if to confirm this assessment. Satisfied, she pressed a kiss to each of their foreheads before standing to address Mrs. Jenkins. "Thank you, Martha. I can't tell you how grateful I am that you were here." "Of course, dear," Mrs. Jenkins replied, her weathered face soft with compassion. "These children are precious to me too." Rebecca nodded, then took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "I need to go speak with the officers. And, with Dennis. Can the children stay here a bit longer?" "As long as needed," Mrs. Jenkins confirmed. "Take whatever time you need." Rebecca knelt again, looking directly into Noah's eyes. "I'll be right across the street," she promised. "I just need to understand exactly what happened. Then we'll go home together. Okay?" Noah nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He wanted to apologize for not calling her sooner, for not protecting Emma better, for causing this whole situation. But no words seemed adequate. As if reading his thoughts, Rebecca cupped his cheek gently. "This is not your fault," she said firmly. "Not any of it. You did everything right, taking care of your sister and going to Mrs. Jenkins when you were uncomfortable. I'm proud of you, Noah." The simple statement released something tight in Noah's chest, bringing unexpected tears to his eyes. He blinked them back, nodding again as his mother gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze before heading back outside. Through Mrs. Jenkins' front window, they watched Rebecca cross the street, her back straight and her stride purposeful. She spoke briefly with the police officers standing in their front yard. Then all of them disappeared around the side of the house toward the backyard where Dennis presumably waited. "Let's move away from the window," Mrs. Jenkins suggested gently. "How about a game of checkers while we wait?" Emma nodded eagerly, always ready for distraction. But Noah found it hard to focus as Mrs. Jenkins set up the board on her coffee table. His mind kept returning to the scene in the backyard, the broken chain, the water everywhere, Dennis's defensive anger and subsequent calculation. He wondered what Dennis was telling the police and his mother. Would he take responsibility for taunting Brutus until the chain broke? Or would he maintain that it was simple wear and tear, an accident waiting to happen that he'd merely predicted? Would his mother believe him? The uncertainty made Noah's stomach hurt. He moved checkers across the board automatically, barely registering the game as Emma captured piece after piece with triumphant little sounds. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Outside, the afternoon light began to fade, the October sun sliding toward the horizon earlier each day as winter approached. Mrs. Jenkins turned on lamps, the warm glow creating pools of light in the darkening room. She offered them dinner, simple sandwiches, and soup, which they ate with little enthusiasm. Finally, when Noah had almost given up hoping for resolution, the front door opened again. Rebecca stood in the doorway, looking exhausted but composed. "Time to go home, kids," she said quietly. "Is Dennis still there?" Emma asked immediately, voicing the question Noah couldn't bring himself to ask. Rebecca shook her head. "No, sweetheart. Dennis has gone home. It's just us now." Relief flooded through Noah so intensely that his knees felt weak. He helped Emma gather Hoppy, who had been keeping them company throughout the ordeal, and thanked Mrs. Jenkins for her protection. "Any time," the elderly woman said, bending to hug them both. "You remember that. My door is always open to you." The walk across the street to their house felt longer than the few dozen steps it actually was. Noah held Emma's hand tightly in his own, while their mother walked slightly ahead, her shoulders squared as if preparing for battle though the conflict was already over. Inside, the house looked surprisingly normal. There was no sign of the chaos that Noah had expected. No beer cans scattered about. No evidence of Dennis's presence beyond a coffee mug left on the kitchen counter. The blankets from their fort had been folded and placed neatly on the couch, as if the entire weekend had been nothing but an ordinary visit. "Why don't you two get ready for bed?" Rebecca suggested, her voice gentle but tired. "It's been a long day, and you have school tomorrow." "What about Brutus?" Noah asked, unable to let the question go unanswered. "Did they find him?" Rebecca nodded. "Yes, the Morgans found him about 6 blocks away. He's home safe now." "And the chain?" Noah pressed. "Did Dennis really break it?" His mother's expression tightened. "Noah, we can talk more about this tomorrow. Right now, I think we all need some rest." But Noah couldn't let it go. "He did it on purpose, Mom." He kept teasing Brutus, throwing things at the fence, making him crazy. "And then when the chain broke—" "I know," Rebecca interrupted, her voice cracking slightly. "The Morgans have security cameras in their backyard. For their tool shed." She took a deep breath. "They showed the footage to the police." Noah stared at her, absorbing this new information. "So Dennis is in trouble?" "Dennis made some very poor decisions today," Rebecca said carefully. "Decisions that could have had serious consequences. The police have spoken with him and, well, he won't be coming around anymore." The finality in her tone made it clear that this was more than just a temporary absence. Dennis was gone, really gone, from their lives. "Good," Emma said with unexpected firmness. "He wasn't nice." Rebecca gave a sad little laugh that sounded close to a sob. "No, it seems he wasn't." She knelt down to Emma's level. "I'm so sorry I didn't see that. I should have listened better when you tried to tell me." "It's okay, Mommy," Emma said, wrapping her small arms around Rebecca's neck. "You were busy." "That's no excuse," Rebecca whispered, holding Emma close. Over her daughter's shoulder, her eyes met Noah's, swimming with tears and regret. "I'm sorry, Noah. I'm so sorry." Noah felt a complicated tangle of emotions: relief that Dennis was gone, sadness for his mother's pain, lingering anxiety from the day's events, and a strange, unexpected sense of loss for the stability he'd thought Dennis might eventually bring to their family. "It's okay, Mom," he said, stepping forward to join the hug. "We're okay." They remained in that embrace for a long moment, the three of them clinging to each other in the quiet living room. When they finally separated, Rebecca wiped her eyes and managed a watery smile. "All right, bedtime for real now. Teeth brushed, pajamas on. I'll be up to tuck you in soon." The nighttime routine felt oddly comforting in its familiarity, as if returning to these simple rituals could somehow restore the sense of security that had been fractured over the weekend. Noah helped Emma find her favorite pajamas, then brushed his teeth alongside her at the bathroom sink. They were both unusually quiet, processing the day's events in their own ways. As Noah tucked Emma into bed, she clutched Hoppy tightly against her chest. "Will you draw me a picture tomorrow?" she asked suddenly. "Of the brave forest animals from the movie?" "Sure," Noah agreed, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "Which one do you want?" "The bear cub," Emma said decisively. "The one that wasn't afraid to stand up to the big machines. Like you weren't afraid to stand up to Dennis." Noah's throat tightened. "I was afraid," he admitted quietly. "Really afraid. But you did it anyway," Emma pointed out. "That's what makes you brave." Her simple wisdom, so clear and uncompromising, stunned Noah into silence. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Good night, Em. Sleep tight." "Night, Noah," she murmured, her eyes already drifting closed. Love you. Love you too, he whispered. He crossed to his own bed, changing into pajamas and sliding under the covers. Through the window, he could see stars beginning to appear in the clear night sky. The storm from yesterday seemed impossibly distant now, though its aftermath had changed everything. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, watching her children with an expression Noah couldn't quite decipher. Something between love and sorrow, pride and regret. You should be asleep, she said softly, crossing to sit on the edge of his bed. I know, Noah agreed. Just thinking. Rebecca smoothed his blanket, a habitual gesture of comfort. You were very brave today, she said, standing up for your sister going to Mrs. Jenkins when you felt unsafe. I want you to know how proud I am of you for that. I should have called you sooner, Noah confessed. When I first noticed Dennis acting weird, I just didn't want to bother you at work, and I thought I could handle it. That wasn't your responsibility, Rebecca said firmly. You're 9 years old, Noah. It's not your job to manage adults or to protect everyone. That's my job, and I failed today. You didn't know, Noah said, instinctively trying to comfort her as he always did. I should have, she insisted. There were signs. Little things that I ignored or explained away because... She trailed off, shaking her head. Because it was easier to believe everything was fine. That I'd finally found someone who could help us rebuild. Are you sad that he's gone? Noah asked cautiously. Rebecca considered this, her expression thoughtful. I'm sad about what I thought we had, she said finally. I'm sad about the future I imagined. But I'm not sad that the real Dennis is gone. Not after what he did today. She leaned down and kissed Noah's forehead. The most important people in my life are right here in this room, she whispered. Nothing and no one will ever be more important to me than you and Emma, I promise. The simple vow, spoken with such conviction, eased something in Noah's chest that had been tight for months, perhaps even since his father had left. He hadn't realized how much he'd needed to hear those words until they were spoken aloud. Get some sleep now, Rebecca said, standing up. Tomorrow's a new day. As she turned off the light and slipped from the room, Noah reached for his sketchbook on the nightstand. In the dim glow of the nightlight, he opened to the drawing he'd been working on for days, the boy with his arms outstretched, standing between the small girl and the shadowy threat. With careful, deliberate strokes, Noah added the final details to the picture. The shadow now had definition. Not a monster after all, but a man with his face turned away. The boy stood firm, his stance protective but no longer frightened. And behind him, the girl wasn't just hiding anymore. She was reaching forward to place a supportive hand on the boy's shoulder. Noah studied the completed drawing for a long moment. Then he closed the sketchbook and set it aside, ready at last to sleep, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. Outside, the world was quiet. Even Brutus, back home and likely exhausted from his adventure, had fallen silent. The autumn night wrapped around the Wilson house like a blanket, soothing and cool, promising the possibility of healing with the coming dawn. 3 weeks after what the Wilson family had come to call simply that Sunday, Noah sat in Dr. Eleanor Peterson's comfortable office, his legs dangling from a chair that was slightly too tall for him. The child psychologist's space was deliberately designed to feel non-threatening. Walls painted a soft blue, shelves lined with books and gentle-looking stuffed animals, a sandbox in the corner for younger children. So, Noah, Dr. Peterson said, her voice calm and measured, how have things been at home this week? Noah considered the question, absently fingering the edge of his sketchbook that lay closed on his lap. Better, he answered finally. Mom's not crying as much. Dr. Peterson nodded, jotting a brief note on her pad. That's good to hear. And how about you? Any more nightmares? Just one, Noah admitted. But it wasn't as bad as before. The nightmares had started the very night after the incident with Dennis and Brutus, of vivid dreams where the chain broke and the dog came through the fence. Where Noah couldn't reach Emma in time. Where Dennis just stood laughing as everything fell apart. Dr. Peterson had assured both Noah and his mother that such dreams were a normal response to trauma and would likely fade with time and processing. She'd been right, mostly, The frequency had decreased from nightly to just occasional disturbances. "And Emma?" Dr. Peterson asked. "Is she still having trouble at bedtime?" "Sometimes," Noah said with a small shrug. "She still wants me to check under the bed and in the closet. And she keeps Hoppy with her all the time, even at school. Her teacher lets her keep him in her cubby." "That's very understanding of her teacher," Dr. Peterson commented. "It's normal for children Emma's age to find comfort in a transitional object like Hoppy, especially after a frightening experience." Noah nodded, having heard similar explanations before. He appreciated that Dr. Peterson never talked down to him, always explained things properly instead of using baby talk or vague reassurances. "Noah, I'd like to talk a bit more about something you mentioned last time," Dr. Peterson said, shifting slightly in her chair. "You said you felt guilty for not protecting Emma better. Can you tell me more about that?" Noah stared down at his sketchbook, running his fingers along its worn edges. Inside were dozens of drawings. Some from before that Sunday, many from after. Dr. Peterson had encouraged his artistic expression, saying it was a healthy way to process his emotions. I knew Dennis was acting weird," Noah said slowly. "I knew something wasn't right. I should have called Mom sooner or told Mrs. Jenkins right away." "You did tell Mrs. Jenkins," Dr. Peterson pointed out gently. "As soon as things became clearly unsafe, you sought help. That was exactly the right thing to do." "But I waited too long," Noah insisted. "I let it get really bad first." Dr. Peterson leaned forward slightly. "Noah, I want you to consider something. You're 9 years old. It wasn't your responsibility to manage or control an adult's behavior. Dennis was the adult in that situation, and he made choices that put you and Emma at risk. That's on him, not on you." It was a message that both Dr. Peterson and his mother had repeated in various ways over the past weeks. But Noah still struggled to fully accept it. The sense of responsibility for Emma's welfare had been so deeply ingrained in him since their father left that it was difficult to recognize its limits. "I guess," he said non-committally. Dr. Peterson seemed to recognize his reluctance. "May I see your sketchbook? If you're comfortable sharing, of course." Noah hesitated, then handed over the book. Dr. Peterson had seen most of his drawings in previous sessions, but he'd added new ones since their last appointment. She opened it carefully, turning pages with respectful attention. Most of the early drawings were variations on the theme that had occupied Noah for weeks: the boy protecting the girl from the shadowy threat. But the newer sketches showed evolution. The 3 forest ranger animals from the movie, standing together against environmental danger. A family of turtles making their way to the ocean, the largest one guiding the smaller ones, and most recently, a simple scene of 3 people, clearly Noah, Emma, and their mother sitting together at a kitchen table, smiling. "These are wonderful, Noah," Dr. Peterson said sincerely. "I notice a change in your recent drawings. Can you tell me about that?" Noah shifted in his chair. "I don't know. I guess I just feel different now." "Different how?" Like I don't have to do everything by myself anymore," Noah said, struggling to articulate the subtle shift in his emotional landscape. "Mom's really trying now. She's home more, and she listens better when Emma or I tell her things." It was true. In the aftermath of that Sunday, Rebecca Wilson had made significant changes in their family life. She'd reduced her hours at the hospital, arranged to work more day shifts and fewer overnights, and most importantly, she'd created space for open conversation about fears, concerns, and feelings, something that had been largely missing since their father's departure. "That sounds like a positive change," Dr. Peterson observed. "How does it feel, not having to carry so much responsibility on your own?" "Good," Noah admitted. "Weird sometimes, but good." Dr. Peterson smiled. "Change, even positive change, often feels a bit strange at first. It takes time to adjust to new patterns." She returned the sketchbook to Noah, who closed it and held it against his chest, a gesture of self-comfort he wasn't fully conscious of making. "Before we finish for today," Dr. Peterson said, glancing at the clock, "I'd like to ask about the Morgan family. Have there been any more interactions with them or with Brutus?" Noah shook his head. Not really, mister. Morgan built a better fence with a rail gate that latches. And they keep Brutus inside more now. He paused, then added, Mom made us take them cookies last week, to say sorry even though it wasn't our fault. Mrs. Morgan was nice about it. She said Brutus is getting training now, so he won't be so mean anymore. That was thoughtful of your mother, Dr. Peterson commented. Sometimes rebuilding relationships in a community after a difficult event takes effort from everyone involved. Their session concluded shortly after, with Dr. Peterson praising Noah's progress and reminding him of the coping strategies they discussed for managing anxiety or intrusive thoughts. In the waiting room, Noah found his mother sitting with Emma, who was coloring intently in a picture book. Hey, buddy, Rebecca greeted him with a warm smile. Good session? Noah nodded, watching as Emma carefully applied purple crayon to what appeared to be a unicorn's mane. Where are we going now? He asked, knowing their mother had taken the entire afternoon off work. I thought we might stop by the hardware store to pick up paint samples, Rebecca said, gathering her purse as Emma packed away her crayons. If we're going to convert the office into Emma's bedroom, we should start thinking about colors. This was another change in their post-Dennis life, the decision to give Emma her own room by reclaiming the unused home office space. It was partly practical as the siblings were getting older, but Noah recognized it also as a symbolic fresh start, a reclaiming of their home. Can I have purple walls? Emma asked eagerly, her face lighting up at the prospect. We'll look at all the options, Rebecca promised, taking her daughter's hand. Maybe a nice lavender that won't be too dark. As they walked to the car, Noah felt a gentle warmth spread through his chest. 3 weeks ago, he couldn't have imagined feeling this sense of cautious optimism. The memory of that Sunday remained, a shadow at the edges of his mind, but it was no longer all-consuming. At the hardware store, they spent nearly an hour examining paint chips, holding them up to the light and debating the subtle differences between Mystic Lilac and Twilight Purple. Emma approached the task with intense seriousness, while Rebecca maintained the patience of a saint, explaining the practical considerations of various finishes and sheens. Noah, less invested in the color selection, found himself wandering to the adjacent aisle where gardening supplies were displayed. Spring bulbs like the ones they'd planted with Mrs. Jenkins occupied prominent shelf space, their packages showing bright flowers in yellows, reds, and purples. On impulse, he selected a bag of daffodil bulbs, the same kind they'd planted at Mrs. Jenkins' house. When he brought them to his mother, she raised an eyebrow in question. For our yard, Noah explained. I thought we could plant them along the front walk. Rebecca studied him for a moment, then nodded. That's a lovely idea. They'll bloom right around the time the snow melts. A symphony of color after the winter gray. Noah quoted Mrs. Jenkins' words from that fateful day, a small smile tugging at his lips. Later that evening, after a simple dinner of homemade macaroni and cheese, Emma's choice, naturally, Noah found himself sitting on the living room floor with Emma, helping her sort through her toys to decide which ones would move to her new room once it was painted. Hoppy goes for sure, Emma declared, setting the stuffed rabbit in the definite pile. And my unicorn lamp, and all my animal books. That's a good start, Noah agreed, watching as she deliberated over a plastic tea set that she hadn't played with in months. From the kitchen came the sound of their mother talking on the phone, her voice low but not secretive. Noah recognized the cadence of her conversation with their grandmother, who called weekly now to check on their progress. Do you want your own room? Emma asked suddenly, looking up from her sorting. You don't seem excited about it. The question caught Noah off guard. Of course I do, he said automatically, then reconsidered. Well, I'll miss sharing with you sometimes. But we're both getting older. It's normal to have separate rooms. Emma nodded sagely, as if she understood the complexities of growing up. We can still have sleepovers sometimes, she suggested, like on weekends or if there's a storm. Definitely, Noah agreed, relieved by her pragmatic solution. Any time you want. And you'll still check for monsters? Even though you'll be across the hall. Noah reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture of affection that had become habitual between them. Always Em. Whenever you need me. The simple exchange encapsulated their new reality, a gradual move toward independence, but with the unbreakable connection that had been forged through shared experience. Noah was learning that protecting his sister didn't mean keeping her at his side constantly. Sometimes it meant giving her space to grow while remaining available when needed. Their mother joined them a few minutes later, sitting cross-legged on the floor to help with the toy sorting. "Grandma sends her love," she told them. "She's thinking about coming for Thanksgiving this year." "Really?" Emma's face lit up. "Can we make pumpkin pie if she comes?" "Absolutely," Rebecca promised. "And those dinner rolls you like so much." The conversation turned to holiday plans, still weeks away but already taking shape in their collective imagination. As they talked, Noah noticed how much more present his mother seemed, not just physically in the room, but mentally engaged, listening attentively to even Emma's most rambling stories about school. When bedtime came, the routine flowed more smoothly than it had in the immediate aftermath of that Sunday. Emma still required her thorough monster check, but the fear behind the request seemed less acute. Noah fulfilled his brotherly duty with patient good humor, looking under the bed and in the closet before pronouncing their room officially monster-free. After tucking Emma in, Rebecca lingered in the doorway of their shared bedroom, watching as Noah settled into his own bed with a book. "You okay tonight, bud?" she asked softly. Noah nodded. "I'm good, Mom. Remember what Dr. Peterson said. If you have another nightmare, you can wake me. Anytime, no matter how late." "I know," Noah assured her. "But I think I'll be okay." She crossed the room to kiss his forehead, then smoothed his dark hair back in a gesture reminiscent of his own interactions with Emma. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "Not just for being brave that day, but for how you're healing. For all your help with Emma. For everything." The simple praise warmed Noah from the inside out. "Thanks, Mom." As Rebecca turned out the light and closed the door partway, leaving it cracked as always, Noah settled deeper under his covers. Across the room, Emma's steady breathing indicated she was already drifting toward sleep, Hoppy clutched securely in her arms. The house around them felt different now, cleansed somehow of the tension that had accumulated during Dennis's presence in their lives. Through the window, Noah could see the first stars appearing in the early evening sky. Soon, the view from this window would be his alone, while Emma would have her own purple sanctuary across the hall. Change, as Dr. Peterson had said, could feel strange at first, but it wasn't always bad. Sometimes it was necessary, even when it came about through painful circumstances. Noah closed his eyes, his mind drifting toward sleep untroubled by the anxieties that had plagued him for weeks. In the morning, perhaps they would plant those daffodil bulbs along the front walk, a promise of brightness to come after the winter months ahead. Outside, the neighborhood settled into its evening quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, not the aggressive sound that had once filled Noah with dread, but the ordinary communication of an animal going about its nighttime routine. Normal sounds for a normal autumn evening, in a world that was gradually finding its balance once again. For months after that fateful October Sunday, the first signs of spring were tentatively appearing in Maple Creek. Tiny green shoots pushed through the half-frozen soil along the Wilsons' front walkway, the daffodil bulbs Noah had planted showing the earliest signs of life after their winter dormancy. It was a Saturday morning in late February, and Noah stood at his bedroom window, watching as weak sunshine illuminated the neighborhood. His room felt both familiar and strange, the same furniture and belongings, but arranged differently in the space that was now solely his. Emma had moved into her newly painted lavender bedroom just after Christmas, a transition that had gone more smoothly than any of them had anticipated. "Noah," Emma's voice called from downstairs. "Mom says breakfast is ready." He turned from the window and made his way downstairs, following the scent of pancakes and the sound of Emma's chatter. The kitchen was warm and bright, with Rebecca at the stove flipping perfectly golden pancakes, while Emma arranged strawberries in elaborate patterns on her plate. "Morning, sleepyhead." Rebecca greeted him with a smile. "I was beginning to think you'd sleep through breakfast entirely." Just thinking, Noah replied, sliding into his usual seat at the table. In the months since Dennis's departure from their lives, the kitchen had become a different place, less a stage for maintaining appearances and more the heart of their home, where real conversations happened over simple meals. Thinking about what? Emma asked, carefully placing a strawberry slice to complete what appeared to be a flower design on her pancake. Noah shrugged. Spring coming. The daffodils are starting to grow. Really? Emma's eyes widened with excitement. Can we go see Mrs. Jenkins' garden later? I bet hers are growing too. I'm sure she'd love that, Rebecca said, placing a stack of pancakes in front of Noah. We can take her some of those muffins we made yesterday. As they ate, Noah observed the subtle changes in his family with quiet satisfaction. His mother looked younger somehow, the perpetual worry lines between her eyebrows less pronounced. She laughed more easily now, especially at Emma's stories about kindergarten adventures. The shadows under her eyes had faded as she'd adjusted her work schedule to include fewer night shifts and more family time. Emma, too, had transformed. The watchful wariness that had characterized her interactions with Dennis had given way to her natural exuberance. She still kept Hoppy close, but more out of affection than security. The monster checks continued, but as a comfortable routine rather than a necessity born of fear. And Noah himself felt different in ways that were harder to articulate. The weight of responsibility that had pressed down on his 9-year-old shoulders had lightened, not because he cared any less for his sister's well-being, but because he understood now that he wasn't solely responsible for maintaining their family's safety. He was a child too, allowed to have his own fears and needs acknowledged. Can we plant more flowers this spring? Emma asked, her mouth full of pancake. Purple ones in my garden space? Chew first, then talk, Rebecca reminded her gently. And yes, we can look at seed catalogs later. I think crocuses might be nice along the side of the house. And sunflowers, Noah suggested. They get really tall. We could plant them against the back fence. The back fence. The words still carried a slight charge, though much diminished from the acute anxiety they'd once provoked. The Morgans had indeed reinforced their fence with proper gates and latches, and Brutus now spent most of his time inside or in their front yard on a sturdy new lead. When the dog did appear in the backyard, it was under Mr. Morgan's direct supervision, part of the training program they'd enrolled in following the incident. Noah had encountered Mr. Morgan at the mailbox a few weeks after that Sunday, a meeting that could have been awkward but instead became an unexpected moment of connection. The construction worker had apologized gruffly for his dog's behavior and for not addressing the situation sooner. A man's supposed to take responsibility for what's his, he'd said, in what seemed to Noah a pointed reference to Dennis's failure to do exactly that. After breakfast, they bundled up against the February chill, lighter jackets now instead of the heavy winter coats of January, a hopeful sign in itself, and walked across the street to Mrs. Jenkins' neat blue house. The elderly woman answered their knock with evident pleasure, ushering them inside to the warmth of her kitchen where the scent of fresh coffee filled the air. Perfect timing, she declared, accepting the basket of muffins Rebecca offered. I was just about to have my morning coffee. Now I have something delicious to go with it. While the adults settled at the kitchen table, Noah and Emma gravitated to the front window that overlooked Mrs. Jenkins' garden. Look, Emma exclaimed, pointing to green shoots poking through the soil. The flowers are waking up. Those are your tulips, Noah reminded her. The ones you helped plant that day. Emma's expression sobered slightly at the reference, but she nodded. I remember. They're going to be red, Mrs. Jenkins said. Noah put his arm around her shoulders in a brief hug. And the daffodils we planted will be yellow. They'll look pretty together. From the kitchen table, Mrs. Jenkins called, Why don't you two check on the bulbs up close? Just stay on the stepping stones so you don't compact the soil. They didn't need a second invitation. Donning their jackets again, they carefully navigated the stone path through Mrs. Jenkins' front garden, crouching to examine the determined green shoots that promised bright blooms in the coming weeks. Through the window, Noah could see his mother and Mrs. Jenkins deep in conversation, their expressions serious but not troubled. Since that Sunday, the elderly neighbor had become even more of a fixture in their lives, not just as an occasional babysitter, but as a trusted confidant for Rebecca and a surrogate grandmother figure for the children. "Do you ever think about Dennis?" Emma asked suddenly, her question pulling Noah back to the present moment. He considered carefully before answering. "Sometimes. Not as much as before." Emma nodded, poking gently at the soil around a green shoot. "Me too. I used to be scared he might come back, but Mom promised he won't." "He won't," Noah assured her firmly. "Mom wouldn't let him, and neither would I." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. "Good, because he wasn't nice to the dog. And when someone isn't nice to animals, they probably aren't nice to people either." The simple wisdom of her statement struck Noah. In the therapy sessions he'd continued to attend, Dr. Peterson had helped him understand that Dennis's treatment of Brutus had revealed something fundamental about his character: a willingness to cause distress for his own amusement, a lack of empathy that had initially been directed at an animal but could easily have transferred to the children had circumstances continued to develop. "You're pretty smart, you know that?" Noah told his sister with a smile. Emma beamed at the compliment. "Mrs. Abernathy says I'm perceptive. That means I notice things." "You definitely do," Noah agreed. They continued their inspection of the garden, identifying the different types of shoots based on their location and the bulbs they'd helped plant months earlier. Their breath formed small clouds in the crisp air, but the sunshine provided enough warmth to make their outdoor exploration comfortable. When they returned inside, rosy-cheeked from the cold, Rebecca was gathering her purse, apparently preparing to leave. "There you are," she said. "I need to run to the grocery store for dinner ingredients. Mrs. Jenkins has kindly offered to let you stay here while I shop, if you'd like." "Can we?" Emma asked eagerly. "Mrs. Jenkins was going to show me how to make paper flowers." "I did promise," the elderly woman confirmed with a wink. "And I believe I mentioned cookies might be involved as well." The decision was unanimous. Rebecca departed with a promise to return within an hour, leaving Noah and Emma in the comfortable care of their neighbor. They settled in the living room, where Mrs. Jenkins had prepared craft supplies on her coffee table: colored paper, scissors with rounded tips, pipe cleaners, and glue. As Emma dove enthusiastically into the paper flower project, Noah found himself drawn to the bookshelf where Mrs. Jenkins kept family photo albums. She had shown him pictures before, her children now grown and living in different states, grandchildren visiting during summer breaks, her late husband in his garden during healthier days. "May I look at your albums again?" he asked politely. "Of course, dear," Mrs. Jenkins replied, helping Emma fold a piece of red paper into a fan shape. "You know where they are." Noah selected a volume bound in green fabric and settled into an armchair. The act of paging through someone else's family history had become strangely comforting to him, a reminder that families came in different forms, evolved over time, endured challenges, and ultimately continued. Mrs. Jenkins had outlived her husband, seen her children move away, and yet here she was, creating new connections, remaining vital to her community. It gave him hope for his own family's future, this evidence of resilience across generations. The hour passed quickly in comfortable productivity. By the time Rebecca returned, Emma had created a bouquet of paper flowers with pipe cleaner stems, while Noah had moved from photo albums to helping Mrs. Jenkins mix cookie dough, carefully measuring ingredients under her guidance. They returned home with paper flowers, promises of real cookies once they were baked, and a sense of connection that extended beyond their immediate family unit. This, too, had been a change in the months following that Sunday, the expansion of their support network to include not just Mrs. Jenkins but other neighbors, parents from school, and Rebecca's colleagues who now sometimes joined them for weekend barbecues or movie nights. The afternoon was spent in quiet domestic activities, Emma working on a school art project at the kitchen table, Rebecca sorting through bills and paperwork, Noah retreating to his room to read and draw. This ordinary Saturday rhythm had become precious to all of them, the simple pleasure of being together without pressure or performance. As evening approached, Noah helped his mother prepare dinner, a task he'd always assisted with but now approached differently. less as a duty and more as a shared activity. They worked side by side chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, the conversation flowing easily between them. Mrs. Jenkins mentioned that her grandson might visit for spring break. Rebecca commented as she sliced bell peppers. He's a bit older than you, 12, I think. She thought you might enjoy meeting him. Noah considered this. That would be cool. Does he like art stuff too? Apparently he's quite the artist, Rebecca confirmed. More into comics and graphic novels, from what I gather. The prospect of meeting someone with similar interests sparked a pleasant anticipation in Noah. Making friends had never been his strongest skill. He tended toward quiet observation rather than boisterous playground activities. But his confidence had grown in recent months, partly through Dr. Peterson's gentle encouragement to connect with peers who shared his interests. After dinner and the evening routine of baths, teeth brushing, and a movie on the living room TV, the time came for bed. Though Emma now had her own room across the hall, Noah still participated in the monster check, a ritual that had evolved from necessity to tradition, preserved for comfort rather than fear. All clear, he announced after the obligatory inspection of underbed spaces and closet corners. No monsters allowed in the Purple Palace. Emma giggled at the nickname they'd given her new room. She sat cross-legged on her bed, Hoppy in her lap and her favorite blanket already turned down for sleep. Noah, she said as he prepared to leave. Can I ask you something? Sure, Em. Are you still having bad dreams? About that day with Dennis and the dog. The question caught him off guard. It had been weeks since he'd mentioned his nightmares to anyone other than Dr. Peterson, and he thought he'd hidden them well when they occasionally recurred. Sometimes, he admitted. Not very often anymore. Why? Emma stroked Hoppy's ears thoughtfully. I had one last night, but it was different this time. Different how? Noah asked, sitting on the edge of her bed. Well, the dog still got loose like before, Emma explained. But this time, instead of being scared, I was brave like you. I helped you make the dog be calm by talking to it super nice. And then we took it home to the Morgans, and they said thank you. The dream's transformation from nightmare to empowerment narrative struck Noah as significant. That sounds like a good dream, actually. It was, Emma agreed. Dr. Patterson says our dreams can change when we start to feel safer. And I do feel safer now. She looked up at him with serious eyes. Do you feel safer too? Noah considered the question honestly. Yeah, I do. Not just because Dennis is gone, but because, I guess because we're all taking better care of each other now. Emma nodded, apparently satisfied with this assessment. Good, because you were always taking care of me, but sometimes I worried about who was taking care of you. The simple observation, so perceptive coming from a 5-year-old, made Noah's throat tighten unexpectedly. Mom takes care of me, he said, and you do too in your way, and I take care of myself better now. And Mrs. Jenkins and Dr. Peterson and Grandma when she visits. Emma added, counting on her fingers. That's a lot of people taking care. Noah smiled, leaning forward to kiss her forehead. It is. That's what makes us lucky, even after hard stuff happens. After Emma was settled for sleep, Noah found his mother in the living room, curled up on the couch with a novel she'd been trying to finish for weeks. She looked up as he entered. Emma all tucked in? He nodded, hesitating in the doorway. Can I ask you something? Rebecca set her book aside immediately, giving him her full attention. Of course, Bud. What's on your mind? He crossed to the couch and sat beside her, gathering his thoughts. Do you ever miss him? Dennis, I mean. His mother's expression shifted, surprise giving way to thoughtful consideration. That's a big question, she said finally. The honest answer is, I miss what I thought we had or what I hoped we might build together. A partnership, support, companionship. She sighed softly. But the real Dennis? The person he showed himself to be that day. No, I don't miss him at all. Noah nodded, processing this. I was worried sometimes that you might be lonely. Without Dad, and now without Dennis. Rebecca put her arm around his shoulders, drawing him against her side. Oh, Noah. I have moments of feeling lonely. Sure. Most adults do, especially single parents. But being with the wrong person is much lonelier than being on my own. She squeezed him gently. Besides, I'm not really alone. I have you and Emma. I have friends, colleagues, neighbors who care about us. That's not nothing. But it's not the same as having someone, a partner, Noah pointed out. No, it's not, Rebecca agreed. And someday I might find that person. The right one, who's kind and honest and who loves both you and Emma as much as I do. But I'm not in a hurry now. I've learned that lesson. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Rebecca added, it's not your job to worry about my happiness, Noah. That's backwards. I'm the parent, you're the child. My job is to worry about you. I know, Noah said. But families take care of each other, right? It goes both ways, even if it's different kinds of caring. Rebecca studied him, her expression softening. When did you get so wise, 9 going on 90, I swear. Noah grinned, pleased by the compliment. Almost 10, actually. Just 3 more months. Don't remind me, Rebecca groaned dramatically. My baby boy hitting double digits. Next thing I know, you'll be asking for a cell phone and going to school dances. Gross. Noah declared with the confidence of a pre-adolescent boy for whom such activities remained firmly in the realm of the unimaginable. Rebecca laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Go on, time for bed. School day tomorrow. As Noah headed upstairs to his own room, he felt a deep sense of contentment that had once seemed impossible in the aftermath of that Sunday. Their family had been altered by what happened, but not broken bent perhaps, tested certainly, but ultimately strengthened in the recovery. In his room, he crossed to the window for his nightly ritual of checking the neighborhood before sleep. The street was quiet, houses glowing with warmth against the February darkness. Mrs. Jenkins' lights were still on across the way, a steady beacon of constancy. The Morgans' house stood dark except for a porch light, their family already settled for the night. And directly below his window, barely visible in the faint glow from the street lamps, the tender green shoots of daffodils continued their patient journey toward the spring sun, unaware of the significance humans placed on their emergence but persistent nonetheless in their annual promise of renewal. Noah smiled to himself as he turned from the window and climbed into bed. In the dark, he reached for his sketchbook on the nightstand, running his fingers over the cover where he'd recently pasted a label, Noah Wilson, artist. Inside were new drawings now, still the boy and the girl but in different scenarios. Building sandcastles at a beach they hoped to visit that summer. Planting flowers with their mother. Playing checkers with an elderly neighbor. Ordinary scenes of a life reclaimed from shadow. The last drawing, his most recent, showed 3 figures standing together in a garden full of blooming flowers, tall yellow daffodils and bright red tulips creating what Mrs. Jenkins had called a symphony of color. The figures held hands, their faces turned toward the sun, their postures relaxed and unguarded. Noah closed his eyes, the image remaining in his mind as he drifted toward sleep. Outside, the world continued its slow turn toward spring, toward renewal, toward the light that always, eventually, follows even the longest winter.